Tonight's show and topic of discussion do not necessarily reflect the opinion of Spaced Out Radio, SOR Media, or its hosts. Listener discretion is advised. Here at Spaced Out Radio, we are about to take you higher. Broadcasting from the Rocky Mountains of Colorado to you listening around the world. Welcome to Spaced Out Saturdays on Spaced Out Radio. You can follow Tessa on our Facebook page at Spaced Out Radio, on Twitter at TessaTNT, and you can subscribe to her YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio for our archives. Now broadcasting from our Mile High Radio Clubhouse on Spaced Out Saturdays with your host, Tessa Nicole Thomas.
Good evening, Spaced Out Radio. Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a Rocky Mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 419.9 in colorful Colorado. It is Saturday, March 30th, Sunday, March 31st for those of you on the East Coast and beyond, and this is Spaced Out Radio. Hope you guys had a rockin' weekend so far. I am your host, TessaTNT, and I'm broadcasting live tonight from colorful Colorado. We are 150,000 strong nightly on Spaced Out Radio Network, spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, Paranormal Radio, TalkStream Live, as well as Deep Talk Radio, which you can find at deeptalkradio.com. Don't forget to head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, where you can peruse the Spaced Out Radio store and read the encounter online, dealing with everything strange, paranormal, and odd. So tonight I have a treat for all my guys and gals out there. Tonight we will be talking to and getting to know Mr. Richard Van Steenberg. Richard Van Steenberg has spent 35 years of researching what he says are humanoid extraterrestrials living among us, or HETLA, and currently has an online petition to help towards the disclosure movement. His online group provides cutting-edge ET and UFO disclosure using new terminology and concepts that allow the civilian public the opportunity to take back control of the narrative. He uses these completely new and unique terminology and concepts to explain why EA, aka Earthlings, cannot resolve the ET UFO phenomena. Richard, welcome to the show tonight. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here, Tessa. It's good to talk to you.
You as well. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Did you have any paranormal or UFO alien experiences as a child that took you towards this direction?
No, if anything, I would say that I'm probably the exact opposite of, a lot of people I meet say that they're contactees or experiencers and things like that. And for me growing up, I had no interest at all in ET or UFOs. Obviously I'd heard the term, but it was the last thing I was interested in. And so what happened with me was, as I got out of college in the 80s, and as I was in my early 20s, I have a really high level understanding of air combat. So I'm a civilian, and I've never had formal training from the military, but because I have such a high level understanding of how air combat works, and I lived and worked across the street from Miramar, which at the time was where Top Gun was. And so I would, spend a lot of time talking to the fighter weapons instructor pilots and a lot of the F-14 and F-18 crews that would, pass through there. In some of the conversations I would have with them, I would be able to talk about Soviet or adversary type aircraft who are our enemy. But if I brought up the topic of a UFO, they would instantly not want to talk anymore. And so I thought that was really bizarre, because if you're going to talk about our enemy and all their aircraft and tactics and stuff like that are up to the limit of what's classified, why do you care about talking about UFOs? So that, to me, was the first time in my life that I sat there and I really started wondering, what's the deal with a UFO that a military fighter pilot won't sit there and have a normal conversation about it? So that took me, that's like I say, it was probably 35 years ago in the mid-'80s or 30 years ago. That started me on the path, and the difference was, like you asked, did I have any experience with ET and UFOs? Because I didn't have any, my mind immediately started theorizing and speculating, well, what if an extraterrestrial pilot came to Earth? Well, so I didn't immediately put in my mind that being would look like, different from a human. I thought it would be a human. It would just be from another planet. So the first thing in my mind was what I call an HET, a humanoid extraterrestrial. And the other thing that immediately started going through my mind is that because I have a really high level understanding of aviation and stuff like that, I know you can't fly in outer space. So the other thing I noticed was the term UFO doesn't really make any sense because these vehicles wouldn't actually be flying. So that's where I came up with the term CTV, or Celestial TAC 1 Vehicle, celestial being a realm that's beyond the universe, so they could transit back and forth not only between star systems in the universe, but to leave the universe and go to other places. TAC 1 is a term to describe the speed of light, similar to Mach 1, how planes go the speed of sound is Mach 1. These vehicles would accelerate past TAC 1 or past the speed of light in order to get there in an amount of time that would make it so that they can complete the round trip, in a reasonable period, whereas right now that's the limitation from us being able to understand it. And then they're vehicles, they're not objects. So it's the mid-'80s, and in my mind, I'm saying HET, humanoid extraterrestrials, and CTV, celestial TAC 1 vehicles. And as I started to go around and study, well, what are all the guys in the community of ufology and what I call etology, or people who study ET, why are they not coming to these same conclusions? And that's where I had to kind of start going back and understanding, how did this whole thing of ET, what's the current narrative that's going on the planet, stuff like that. So right from the beginning, the path that I took was completely different than all the people that you hear about. Obviously, everyone's to some degree is different, but mine wasn't even close. I mean, I'm literally using a completely different set of terminology and concepts from day one.
Yeah, and have you been able to catch the series on History Channel, Project Blue Book?
So I studied a lot of that stuff growing up. I haven't watched the show because, to me, I don't really need to watch those things to explain me. I already have it, in my opinion, I know what's going on. And so watching those shows are just there for the public to help. What I'm basically saying going on is a concept called subnation, which stands for subliminal dissemination. In other words, I think that there are millions of people on planet Earth who are these HET, or humanoid extraterrestrials. A lot of people who you think are Earthlings are actually them. They would run the government, run the military, run the mainstream media. For example, produce these types of shows like the History Channel, like Ancient Aliens and Project Blue Book. And what they're doing is they're putting this information out to help bring the public and perform this act, what I call subnating the public, to get them to the point that they have a basic idea of what's going on, so that when disclosure takes place, the public won't panic. They'll basically have heard so much, seen so many TV shows, seen so much information about this stuff, they'll basically be going like, God, come on already, tell us what's going on. We know it's going on. You just, it's like the suspense is killing us. So to me, I don't really spend time watching those shows, or, I'm aware they're going on. I'll see, information on the internet and stuff like that during the day. But I have a completely different, for example, like, the term Project Blue Book. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that the reason this is to understand the HET, one of the things you have to do is realize they have strategies and tactics they're using on the planet. So one of them is that they leave clues on the planet that they've been here the whole time, because when they reveal their presence at disclosure, the public's going to have a hard time believing that millions of people on Earth that have been here the whole time weren't actually Earthlings. So in order to make that transition quicker, they'll have a lot of clues for us to see. Well, if you know that, you can go back and start looking for the clues. So, for example, in the title of the book, Project Blue Book, the word blue, B-L-U-E, well, if you know how their language works on Earth, the term fly, F-L-Y, like to fly an airplane, that actually stands for forward levitation using energy. So the Y is the last letter of the word energy. Well, so blue is backwards levitation using energy. In other words, these, what people call UFOs, what I'm calling celestial tack-1 vehicles, or CTVs, these things don't fly. So they can perform levitation in different directions, whereas a plane can only fly going forward, using levitation going forward. So by putting the title of the book, Project Blue Book, they've left a clue right in the title of it that it stands for backwards levitation using energy, because that's one of the things these vehicles can do. Whereas all the Earthlings just sit there and they don't realize that, and they watch that show trying to figure out, did we get a recovered spacecraft? Do we reverse engineer it? And they're following the narrative instead of being able to see the whole picture like I can, to realize that show and a lot of the information we're being presented each day is just subnation.
Yeah, what I was thinking of when I mentioned it was not only all of the investigations they went on, but this guy is working with an Air Force pilot, and anytime anything's been shown before him, even when it's proven like these are actually alien aircraft, he's afraid to say anything, because in the military, if you do, you get discharged with a honorable discharge because you're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs or whatever, or your credibility is just blasted away, because they don't want that put out there. They don't want anybody hearing about it if you ever talk about this, which my grandpa, he was in the Air Force, and they told him, if you ever talk about this, well, we won't only come after you, but your family. So once he reached about 68 to 70 years old, he finally sat down and was telling us all kinds of stories about different alien and UFO contact that he had witnessed, and it was amazing to hear. We still have yet for anybody to come after us, but I think they just tell you that to make you think they're there, and sometimes they are, but a lot of times they aren't.
Well, and to some degree, like what you're describing right there goes right in line with what I'm saying, in the sense that HET live among us, and they control the government, they control the military, and so one of their strategies and tactics throughout history has been, let's create the psychosis that anybody that sees, it's one thing to sit there and say, hey, I believe that life might exist on another planet. As soon as you cross over that imaginary line and say, hey, I saw an extraterrestrial vehicle, or UFO, or I think there's an extraterrestrial base on the planet or whatever, you're immediately seen as a nutcase, and your career could be ended, and people don't want to associate with you. And not only in the military, basically in society, it's the same way, or it might be changing a little bit, but throughout history, it's been that way. I think they did that on purpose in order for them to maintain the status quo that they wanted on the planet. And so, as you're talking about them producing this show, Project Blue Book, and the new one that Tom DeLonge's got coming out called Unidentified, and just a lot of the stuff that's coming out, the Nimitz encounter and information that's being released with Harry Reid and that ATIP program, they're trying to change the discussion taking place in the public forum to make it so that it's slightly moving away from, okay, well, maybe you're not totally crazy. Don't go all the way to the other end of the spectrum of, they, like me, they exist, they live here, they're humans, but they're trying to say, okay, let's go to step one. Maybe it's possible, and let's start the discussion. So all I'm doing is basically, and the reason why for me it's different is I just didn't start doing this a couple years ago. I was doing it 30 years ago. The difference was, I'm not a ufologist. This isn't my passion, in the sense that I feel like I have a responsibility to put this out there. For me, what happened is, over time, it became so obvious that nobody can figure out what's going on, because they don't have a high enough level understanding of the aviation component of it, that they can't draw the connection between the military fighter pilot and the UFO pilot, and there's like a boundary layer between them. And as soon as you can draw that connection that our military can't defend Earth against these vehicles, you can fully see what's going on. And so then I remember back in the 80s, there was nobody I had that I could ask and that would help and explain it to me, and it was really frustrating. So to me, the biggest thing I try and do is for a lot of people that I see out there that are just scratching their heads going, what is going on out here? I basically am trying to say, hey, I can't prove it because the government and military won't corroborate what I'm saying. But if you want my opinion, this is what's going on. You have to be able to speak a slightly more technically accurate set of terminology and understand some concepts that currently aren't being put out there. But if you spend a little bit of time and pay attention, you can actually see them on. So this is another concept I use. For example, when you grew up, you were basically what I call misdirected. Everybody in society, when they're born, they're misdirected. The HET living among us lie to everybody, and they create a false reality that ET doesn't exist and UFOs don't exist, and you're crazy if you talk about it. As you become an adult, you start to use your own critical thinking and say, well, that doesn't really make sense. I think maybe they do, but you don't want to, ruin your social life or ruin your job or something like that. So it's difficult for people to find the right information that's out there. And basically what they're doing is they're walking around in what I call EAI mode, or Earthling Intellect mode. They're using this incorrect narrative, this false reality, as the only way to try to comprehend what's going on. And what you literally have to do is elevate your intellectual awareness level to that of an extraterrestrial, in the sense that you have to look at Earth, you have to look at the events, the people, the what's going on, and you have to look at it from the way the extraterrestrials see it, not the way the Earthlings see it. And once you start doing that, and you realize what they might, start theorizing or speculating what they might be doing, it actually becomes pretty easy to see what's going on. It doesn't require, like, for example, I'm convinced there are HET living on this planet who are grown adults who have children, and they tell their children between the ages of 5 to 8, and those children can comprehend what's going on and keep their mouths shut. So I don't really think that it's that sophisticated. The key is that you need the person that's telling you to be viewed as coming from an official position or a position of authority. So, for example, a child doesn't have a lot of information pre-stored in their mind to make decisions based on. They're sort of like a open pad of paper, a blank pad of paper, and they're willing to listen to what's out there. And then to have their parents tell them, who are seen as the ultimate authority figure, they have no problem picking up on it right away. Whereas a grown earthling adult who has spent their whole life growing up and is fully committed to this thing that ET doesn't exist, UFOs don't exist. If they do, the government and military are going to have to tell us, well, it's going to take an enormous amount of retraining their thought processes and what they believe in and what they see as factual and all that other stuff in order to get them to see it. And most people won't go there until the government and the military take them there. They're not willing to, take that leap as an individual and say, wow, the government and the military could really be behind this.
Yeah, and that's funny because I was in the military. I was in the Marine Corps, and they're considered citizens. Everybody else are civilians. And if anything ever comes down, the citizens will know. The civilians never will, basically. So the citizens will be protected. The civilians won't. So why trust your government? And before I even went into the government, I didn't trust it. The only reason I went into the government was because I was in an abusive relationship and I really didn't have anywhere else to go. I always said I'd never join the military, but I did. But yeah, just learning all these things that they were telling me after I joined, I was just like, I knew it. I knew it all along, but they just reiterated upon what I knew. And also going back to what you were talking about as far as shows and trying to open people's minds to aliens and UFOs and all this other stuff. Ancient Aliens on the History Channel is one of my favorites, and it's funny because every time I watch it and they're going through all these things and they're like, yes, and so-and-so says yes, and then they go on, and it's funny. But there's different carvings on pyramids, there's different things carved out from gold that look like spacecraft that we have today. There's so many different things that prove to us that aliens actually do exist, and they have been here, and even in ancient paintings where you see Jesus and Mary, in the background you see UFOs in the background, in the sky. Like, it's just mind-blowing how people can't see that and know that they've been here forever.
Well, it's just, I guess it probably has to do with personality types, or I don't know if that's the right word, but I think a very small percentage of the public, it comes naturally to be inquisitive, to be open-minded, to sense, to go, there's no way that's not true. They've got to exist. It doesn't even make any sense. Whereas I think the majority of the public, their minds just don't work like that. And then to have grown up the whole time so that you're an adult now, you've already been taught it's not true. No one around you is talking about it or believes it. And you've got to work all day. You don't have time to study this stuff. You're so busy. You've probably got a wife and kids and your job and who knows all the other stuff going on. And it's too much. And then to go to the extreme, and kind of like you were talking about the thing about people in the military, like I have a difficult time. It's one thing if I go up to a person who I feel is a really high-ranking, would know what's going on, and I'm really questioning what they're saying. But, who wants to go up to a kid that's signed up for the military and is going to go volunteer his life and go out, and go into a battlefield scenario and have to tell him, hey, aliens control the military. I don't feel comfortable pushing someone's mind who's in that type of a scenario. So it's it's almost like the same thing with religion. I'm convinced that ET created religion to control the people of Earth, but I don't feel, unless a person is comfortable having the discussion with me and clearly, clarifies that right from the beginning, I don't like going up to people and trying to explain to them, hey, the things you believe in aren't true, because I think, I don't like people doing that to me.
Yeah, they take it personally.
Yes, I have empathy from their position, even though I might not agree with them, unless they specifically say, well, no, I want to hear what you believe, and I'm willing to accept the possibility that you might be telling me what I'm believing is incorrect. Unless I can get to that point in a conversation, I'm not really comfortable. When I was younger and in the beginning, as I started trying to learn this, I tried to push it onto everybody. And I realized how quickly a lot of people got really upset. Some people wouldn't ever talk to me anymore. And so there's a very fine line. You have to become very astute at paying attention to the signals they're giving off in terms of who can, obviously you do this for a living, so it's not, you must hear a lot of different opinions going on. Some are really aggressive and some are very complacent. But a lot of people in their every day-to-day life, this is an extreme subject because it's pushing the boundaries of everything they know about life.
Yeah, and you were saying you'd look to, like the higher ups, but I think I'd go down to like the privates and PFCs or whatever it is in that military field, because they're more likely to talk. The captains and above, lieutenants and so on and so forth, they're less likely to talk because they know that if they do, like, they're going to be court-martialed or so on and so forth. But if you go down to the lower levels, people that are there witnessing these events, they're more likely to talk because they have less to lose.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. I guess the reason why I said what I say is that the way my mind thinks, it has a very militaristic viewpoint. So I look at, okay, who's the leader? Because if you can get control of the leader, all the other ones are in jeopardy and have to make a decision because the leader now is no longer capable of leading. Whereas if you go and you start with the guys who are in the back, you have to work your way all the way up to the front to get to the leader. So it's sort of like that aspect. But I get your point. I think that's part of the reason why I came up with this whole thing about the petition, in that a lot of people laugh at me and say, oh, yeah, right, like someone in the government's actually going to take that petition seriously. And I'm like, well, the real purpose of the petition, even though I would like to see that happen, is that if all the basic people in everyday life would read it and they would understand the difference that we're not just looking for ET and UFOs, you have to take it. So that's like this, when I said misdirection and subnation, you have to take it up to that third level, what's called I-nation, or intellectual dissemination. As soon as you start talking HET and CTVs, and for example, and then what I call the UEA, uninformed Earthlings, if all the people of Earth would start walking around and identifying themselves as EA or Earthlings, instead of saying I'm an American, I'm a Russian, I'm a Chinese, if they would identify themselves planetally or globally instead of nationally, and they would use that terminology HET and CTV, it would force disclosure on society, because now for the first time, you could literally have a kid who doesn't even have a driver's license yet. He's 14 or 15 years old, and he could be seeing CTV's Vectate, and you could have a fighter weapons instructor pilot who's one of the most competent aviation people on the planet saying, hey, a UFO, and the kid who doesn't even have a driver's license is speaking at a higher technical aviation level, pointing out that these vehicles aren't flying, and you have the most advanced aviation type person on the planet still saying they're flying. So basically the narrative, if the public would read the petition, obviously signing it helps it and gets if the mainstream media got involved, stuff like that, but you could literally have the public speaking with more command authority on the subject matter and controlling the narrative, whereas right now what happens is society, we just sit back and we get spoon-fed the subnation on the TV shows and the internet and whatever each day in terms of, you know, here's what SETI's doing, here's the latest UFO, here's MUFON, here's this, here's that. And they just move us along each day, getting closer to disclosure with the path that they want to take. The people could stop this right now if they would just be capable of understanding what's actually going on. That's a big step, but...
Yeah, and I find that a lot of these shows that are out, like Ancient Aliens and such, are trying to expand our minds to be able to accept when they do disclose to us that there are UFOs and aliens, and even, like you were saying on your website and such, aliens among us, which I do really believe in that.
Well, and so that's a very small percentage of people who've even contemplated that thought that aliens would actually, you know, most people have never contemplated, or very just the briefest thing maybe to exist. And then you get to the ones where they'll sit down and say, well, you know, could life have, you know, they'll start pondering a little bit. But to find people who've actually contemplated, did ET come down here, and were they here like ancient aliens building pyramids? And then to sit here and say even beyond that, well, no, they've been here the whole time living among us. Some of the most famous people throughout history aren't even Earthlings. It's a very, very small percentage of people on the planet that are willing to go and think or do think and believe and understand that. So it's a small group, but if you can get the word out there sooner than the way society's moving, you could force disclosure. I mean, to me, that's the objective, is to not sit here and wait for them to make us comfortable and then finally announce it to us, but to push them, to force them to tell us.
So I have a question in the chat room. Solar Rocker is asking, so if aliens run our world powers and media, why push the fear factor rather than the opposite?
You mean, why am I pushing the fear factor, or why are they?
He didn't specify. He's probably talking about the government or whoever's doing it. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Well, I can tell you this. I'll just tell you what my opinion is that for me, I come straight out and I say exactly what I'm thinking. I think that they created us. I think they orphaned or abandoned us on the planet so that they're not telling us that, you know, how we got here and what we're doing. And their goal is to enslave us or use us as intellectual slaves. A lot of people have a difficult time understanding that because they think slavery, you have to be in chains and be whipped. And what I'm saying is that, no, they can just get you to do the work for them without you being aware that that's what you're really doing. So I'm using the terms like war and slavery and things like that, which people aren't usually comfortable with. And that's a lot of the reasons people don't like hearing my point of view, because it's too scary for them. As for the government, my opinion of what the government and the military are doing is that I think this whole thing was designed before Earth ever existed. I think ET builds star systems and planets, and just like Earthlings build housing developments to live in, they create star systems with planets on them, and they move to them as the other star systems die or as their systems grow and they need more places to live. But everybody on all the planets knows what's going on. Occasionally, they'll create these planets where they'll put a group of beings on the planet, and they won't, you know, they'll devolve them, is the term I use. They'll make them like cavemen in the sense that they reduce their intellectual and physical. They don't give them the ability to do mental telepathy and telekinesis and all these other things. and they basically raise them up without them being aware of how life really works. And so this whole thing is a plan that started before Earth existed. The whole history of Earth is the script basically being read out as history. You're seeing what they were planning the whole time when you read history. And so this whole thing of disclosure is simply another phase in the process of them. They're going to disclose to us that they exist. They're going to inform the people of Earth as not to everything that's going on, but some basic stuff that's going on. And think of Earth like an airport in the sense that when you go to an airport, basically it's a hub. You've got people coming and going. That's a main thing on the Earth. Well, Earth is like a node in the star systems where people are going to come and go. So after disclosure, you're going to see beings from other planetary systems coming here, and you're going to have Earthlings leaving to go to other planetary systems. So Earth will function like a hub, to from transitions. So basically, when you say the fear factor, is the government pushing the fear factor on us, or is it me describing, saying, hey, it's war and slavery? To me, I don't really look at it as fear. I try and just look at it as what's actually taking place. I realize that it's scary for people. It's probably not as scary for me because I've been dealing with it so long. My mind is kind of used to it, so I don't see it as such a scary thing, whereas back in the 80s and 90s, I definitely thought it was scary. But to me, it's more just that's just the way it is. I wish that they were benevolent beings who were just going to come down here and wave a magic wand and everything was going to be perfect. But and this is just my opinion, I think that, and I'm not sure why, I think that the malevolent beings have control, and that's why Earth is in such chaos, because I can't imagine a benevolent being. And I know there's stories that they give us as to why, but in my personal opinion, no benevolent being is going to allow this to take place. So then that gets into each person has to make the decision for themselves as to whether they want to listen to what I'm saying, because a lot of people want to believe that a benevolent being will come down and will, that we're just Earthlings screwing up Earth and fighting with each other. I think the ET is tricking us into fighting with each other so they can use that diversion, what's the saying, to divide and conquer.
Right.
And they're using that to trick us and deceive us, and that helps them build the technology they want and divert the financial resources where they want. Whereas other people, to me, that all makes sense, whereas a lot of other people sit there and look at it and go, there's got to be a better benevolent being that's going to come down and fix all the Earthlings for being so confused. And so then this just goes back to my personal opinion, because I can't prove it. I think that if there actually was a benevolent being, the benevolent being or beings would never have allowed something this to take care of, because there are people who are having their lives ruined on a level of, incomprehensible. I could start naming horrible crimes that are done to people. I'm sure you can draw some imagination in your mind right now. Just pull up the newspaper.
Even since the beginning of time, and it's also been alliterated in artwork, you see these different UFO craft having war in the sky, and of course the people back in that day didn't have that technology. So they're fighting over the Earth, who's going to rule it, and so then we have this person or this alien species taking over, and BTO in the chat room was asking, are you referring to the Sumerian tablets, particularly Anu, Enlil, and Inkai?
The Anu.
Inky?
Now, go ahead.
Oh, I wasn't sure if I pronounced that right. Is it Inkai or Inky?
Is it E-N-K-I or Anunnaki?
Yeah, E-N-K-I.
Well, so this is where it gets, for me, as I started going back and studying all the different names of ET and all the different potential societies that are down here, what I came to the conclusion is that the extraterrestrials are intentionally placing all this information on Earth to make it more difficult to deal with what's going on. They're confounding the Earthlings by making it so that it's not simple to understand what's going on. So what I do is I basically just sit there and say you have Earthlings and you have extraterrestrials. And I just group them all into that group. a lot of people don't like that because they want to know, well, is it the Anunnaki, is it the Enki, is it this, is it that? And what I'm trying to explain to them is that if you're trying to figure that out, ET has got you spending your time focusing on something else instead of focusing on the process that's actually taking place. It's sort of like, how I told you earlier about TET and HET?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have an extraterrestrial and he comes to Earth, there's two possibilities. One, he's a TET or transient extraterrestrial, meaning he's not on his home planet anymore. But you could instantly identify him visually because you would know he's not a human and he's not an animal. Whatever he looks like, if he doesn't fit into those two categories that you've seen growing up, you know he's an extraterrestrial. But because he's not on his home planet, he's a TET. The only other possibility is they can walk among us as humanoid extraterrestrials, which we think are Earthlings, which is the secret to how they, accomplish everything, because we don't know to look for those. So the way I describe it is all you have to know is two things, TET or HET. If they've got you trying to analyze all these different civilizations and names and all these other things, they're just putting an additional burden of information in your mind, and then you have to debate that with someone else. Do they agree with it, or do they think it's something else? And this is their strategy to confuse the Earthlings. And so what I do is I just push the whole thing right back onto the extraterrestrials in the sense that they're all just lumped into one category, and when we get disclosure, then we can sit down and start breaking it down. And it kind of gets into the thing of, how we talked about malevolent and benevolent ET.
Mm-hmm.
I just sit there and it's like I group all them into one group too, just based on the activity that I see going on. I see activity that is the majority of malevolent, not benevolent. So that's why I say the ET are malevolent or omnipotent and the benevolent are impotent. And I use the analogy of if you were out on a battlefield and you're at war with another group and you get injured and the enemy captures you, they're going to have a nurse that's going to try and heal you. Well, that nurse is like a benevolent enemy. She doesn't want to see you injured. She wants to see you get healed and get better. But when she's all done, or he, a nurse don't be, it doesn't have to be a man or woman. When they try and heal you and make you better, they're going to take you and put you in a prisoner of war camp. They're not going to let you run back out to the front lines and start trying to fight their teammates who are the malevolent ones that are the front lines. So you know how like a lot of people in society don't like the military because they have a hard time with the military going out and killing people and stuff like that. It's kind of like the same thing that if you just, depending on how you look at it, if a benevolent group was controlling everything, in my personal opinion, you wouldn't see the events that you're seeing on the planet. And so then when you see throughout history all these different groups who have supposedly been down here from other planetary systems, if you try and break it down and know who they are and convey that to everybody, everyone's going to have different groups they believe in. They're going to have different opinions. It just becomes the work of the extraterrestrials to psychologically defeat or intellectually defeat the Earthlings. And what I'm trying to do is make it like all you have to know is 1 + 1 is 2 and ABC spells cab. You don't have to have a PhD in etology or study of extraterrestrials. You're doing they're tricking you by getting you to buy into all that stuff.
And we got a couple questions in the chat room. Sir Robin is asking, is what happens in the movie They Live already happening? And I'm not quite sure I understand that question. Do you?
Well, I haven't seen the movie They Live, but I guess what he's basically asking is it sounds like the movie is describing maybe similar to what he's seeing, either what I'm seeing or what's happening in society. Let me just pull it up and see if it gives me a quick...
And I haven't seen that movie either, so that's why I didn't understand the question. I'm like, wait a minute.
So he gets a pair of sunglasses, and when he puts the sunglasses on, it lets him see what's really going on. So I guess
like
what I would say is...
different polarity or whatnot.
Well, it's kind of like, when you have the sunglasses off, everyone looks like a human, whereas when you put the sunglasses on, you can see the ones that are aliens versus the ones that are Earthling because they don't look humanoid anymore. So what I would say is that instead of putting on a pair of sunglasses, what you're basically doing is, and it gets back to that when I talked about EAI or Earthling intellect versus ETI or extraterrestrial intellect, what you're basically doing is instead of putting on sunglasses, you're just raising your intellectual awareness level or making yourself more intelligent, more aware by realizing what is ET doing. And the reason why Earthlings are having such a hard time being aware of what this is because nobody throughout history has created the narrative or the reality that millions of the people on Earth are not from Earth. And so, I mean, when you walk around the streets every day, by default, everybody just naturally presumes that everybody's an Earthling. I mean, you don't walk around and start questioning, hey, are you an Earthling or are you an extraterrestrial or, a humanoid extraterrestrial? So by starting to think like that, I would use the analogy that could be similar to putting the sunglasses on. But I would also say that movies that are made out of Hollywood, in my opinion, is run by HET, and all these movies that you're getting are them subnating us or subliminally disseminating the information about how they live through sci-fi and all these other things to make us aware and prepared. In other words, I would say that a lot of the information that we're going to get at disclosure is already stored in everyone's minds. They're just not aware of it. They've seen it in movies. They've heard it read it in books. They've heard it in conversations. It's there. They just haven't had all the pieces connected together.
Yeah, and it's funny because there are subliminal messages that come through, and some people catch it, but most people don't. But if you play it back slowly, you'll see these different messages come through during commercials or during a show, and it's pretty interesting and intriguing. But BTO in the chat room was asking, who are the ones who will disclose? Would you consider Earth to be the university and the center of this universe, so to speak?
Well, so to me, disclosure, there's two possibilities. What I call CTAD, SETAD, or Scheduled Extraterrestrial Architecture Disclosure, meaning before Earth existed, they planned this whole thing out, so they have basically a time frame when they plan on actually having disclosure occur, and it's part of this whole architecture of all the events they've been having take place on Earth the whole time. And so just like using the History Channel as an example, seeing them roll out Ancient Aliens and now Project Blue Book and now Tom DeLonge's new show, Unidentified, where they're going from like Ancient Aliens, meaning old school, it happened thousands of years ago, Project Blue Book was a couple decades ago, to Unidentified, it's almost present day. The Nimitz encounter was within the last decade. So you're seeing them subliminally put the information out to help prepare us for disclosure. So you can tell disclosure is getting a lot closer. But the point I'm making is that society could force disclosure tomorrow if everybody was using the right terminology and concepts in the public realm, not in the government or military or private realms. We need to, this isn't an American problem. It's all 195 countries on the planet. It's a global Earthling problem. So then the question is once they disclose to us, well, what does that mean for Earth in terms of how our position in outer space of society? And that's where it's going to be really complicated, because I think that there's a lot more than just the universe. I think just like how you have cities and states and countries on Earth, I think you're going to find out that ET has, for example, you could be a commander that controls a planet or a solar system or a star system, a galaxy or a universe or a multiverse. So there's going to be all these different ET societies, and some are going to be working with each other. Others will probably be at war against each other. Probably a lot of the things you see happening on life on Earth are mirror images of what we're going to see going on out there. We're going to be a very unique species of beings because we were put on a planet, not told the truth. So relative to everybody else, we're going to be kind of like the outcasts in the sense that we're different than everybody else. How our role plays into that, I'm not, I've theorized on it. I'm not really sure, but to me, what I just basically focus on is two things are going to happen. Either CTAD, Scheduled Extraterrestrial Architectural Disclosure, where the government and military and the people running society disclose to us what's going on, or the public gets control of the narrative and forces disclosure ahead of time. So to me, I'm just trying to compare those two events to figure out, right now, CTAD's going to happen first no matter what, because I can look at the way the global population of 7 billion people are. They're not walking around identifying themselves as Earthling, aware that humanoid extraterrestrials live among us. They still think that extraterrestrial vehicles are called UFOs. They still think those vehicles fly. They don't realize that they're vectating. So we have a long ways to go if we're going to try and force disclosure in terms of society picking up the actual narrative and reality of what's going on. So right now, I would say it's just the scheduled disclosure that they're planning is what we're going to see happen. And it's just a question of do enough people pick up on this and realize, does the light go on in their head, go, oh my God, I see what you're saying. And kind of like you said, there's a small percentage of people that get it, but it's going to take a lot more than a small percentage. And once that small percentage starts growing and people start picking up on it, you can't imagine the amount of confusion the people who are running society can create by being able to, have stories and events and just other stuff to distract everybody every day. I mean, look at this, what the Mueller investigation saying that Trump was being run by Putin. That took 2.5 years every single day on the news. I mean, they can just launch a new event, whether it's true or not, it's irrelevant, and then everybody will just focus on that. So, I mean, even if they started to sense that people were getting control of realizing what's going on, they can quickly create a ton of events that only a really disciplined, focused mind will be able to not be drawn into.
Yeah, and BTO was saying, hold on, I just saw it and then I lost it. Where did it go? He was basically saying benevolent beings acting like malevolent beings and malevolent beings acting like benevolent. Let me see if I can find it again.
Well, I mean, just even on that topic, these are things that you have happening. You could just leave ET out of the equation, just think of Earthling things. Like you have spies, they become double spies, or, and good people become bad people, or bad people act like, con jobs, they act like good people. So what Earthlings are going to realize is that this is going to get really sophisticated really quickly, because ET understands how to do all this stuff. They understand how to work as groups. They understand all these different methodologies that we're just beginning to contemplate might be possible. And the Earthlings are completely unprepared for this. They have no one's forewarned them. They've never studied it. They're missing a lot of the terminology. So you really have to be, even someone like me who's spent 30 plus years paying attention to the stuff that, I think I have a pretty good grasp of what's going on. Even I can easily be duped because I don't understand all the different things they're capable of doing yet. I haven't seen their whole, repertoire of tricks that they can play, for lack of a better way to describe it.
Sharon is asking, where are you getting your information from, and is all of your ideas just theories?
Well, so yeah, basically I would say what happened is back in the 80s, I started theorizing and speculating based on the military pilots' inability to defeat extraterrestrial vehicles in outer space, which meant we were vulnerable from a militaristic viewpoint. They have air supremacy over our planet. We can't defend ourselves. So from that point, what I did is, rather than going around and start broadcasting, hey, this is my theory, this is my opinion, my speculation, I spent the next, not quite 30 years, because I've been explaining this for the last few years, but what I did is I started to continue to theorize and speculate, and then I would test it, looking for repeating patterns in society to confirm that what I'm saying is accurate versus, no, my theory is not accurate because I can't see it explaining the events that are taking place on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, when you see most people talking about this subject matter on a daily basis, what they do is they go back through history and they pull out the top events throughout the historical timeline, and they try and attribute the extraterrestrial analysis to that event. You can basically take any event on a daily basis in real time and explain the role that that event takes place. And I've never seen anybody able to do that. So to me, what I've done is I've raised my intellectual awareness level to that of extraterrestrial. I can comprehend what they're doing, and I can then use that to explain on a daily basis the events that are taking place, and using the terminology and concepts and how they fit into these strategies and tactics. So in the most simplistic thing, you could say, yeah, it's 100% my theory, it's 100% speculation, it's 100% my opinion. I can't get the government to corroborate it, to confirm all these other things. But the other point that I'm making is that I wouldn't spend any time trying to see it as my opinion, my theory, my speculation. If you spend the time studying what I'm saying, you can see it for yourself. You don't need me to explain this to you. So to use, for example, let's say you went to Russia and you didn't know how to speak Russian, and you hired me to be like a guide or a translator to take you around and give you some basic understanding about where to stay, where to eat, and how to get transportation and go to the sites you wanted to see. And then you went home and you go, wow, I really like that. Well, you could learn the Russian language and you could start studying how life works in Russia and comprehend it on your own. You could go back to Russia on your own, and you don't need me as the translator or the guide to explain to you what's going on. You can basically become like a Russian in the sense, not that you're an actual citizen of Russia, but you can walk among the Russian people and you can associate with them. You can collaborate and enjoy the society that they have because you're really fond of it and comprehend what's going on. What I'm seeing is happening is that if you want to understand what they're doing, you don't have to just look at it as a theory or an opinion or speculation. You can comprehend extraterrestrial intelligence on your own and be able to see them on our planet and see what they're doing on a daily basis. The thing you need to be prepared for is, in my opinion, it's not going to be a pretty picture, because you're going to realize a lot of the ugliness that's taking place on Earth, they're doing on purpose.
So, Solar Rocker is asking, in Richard's opinion, what is the purpose of humans?
So this is my opinion. They created us to use us as their slaves. So a slave is like a resource. So whereas Earthlings see resources as minerals like gold or oil or things that are physical and material in nature, extraterrestrials see a being with an intellect that they can not physically control, but intellectually control. In other words, by creating an arena that they do what they want to do, and they can control us without having to put us in chains and whip us. It's a resource that's like the most valuable resource in outer space. And so this is one of the things they create to use us as.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, basically, we hear different stories about how we're made. Some people believe that we came from Mars, we're all Martians. Other people believe that we were here already, and these aliens came down, gave us intelligence to mine gold and other things that they needed for their spacecraft, and used us as slaves, and now we've grown beyond that. Or maybe we haven't. Maybe they're still mining information from us. It's hard to decipher what actually is going on.
Well, so I would use like the concept of them having us mine gold for their spacecraft. I mean, that's partially the concept of being a slave, but I would say that the intellectual slave thing hasn't even really begun yet. It's going to begin after disclosure, and when we start transiting star systems and going to other planetary systems, that's when you're really going to realize the role that they want you to play on an intellectual basis, because you're going to get to see the whole way that their society works and how you function within it. And so one of the analogies that I use when I try and explain this to people is that a couple of years back, I took this trip to the Bahamas, and I stayed at I think it was called the Atlantis. It was a resort. And one day we took this boat ride out to this little island, and there was a port, and in the port they had dolphins. And so it was like kind of like a cove, and it had a gate. And so the dolphins would just sit there and do these tricks all day long. You know, they'd feed them, and the people would sit there as spectators going, oh, wow, that's really cool. And so I was talking to one of the girls. I said, what would happen if you open the gates up and let the dolphins go? And she goes, you know, it's really interesting. If you open the gates, the dolphins won't leave. They'll just stay here because they want the free food. And she goes, but the reason we put the gates up is because we don't want the predators to come in and attack them. And so I started, to me, this is how my mind works, I started thinking that of basically like Earth is that little, or even as after disclosure, when we start transiting into other star systems, say the Milky Way galaxy is our next little stepping point, that we're like those dolphins in the sense that they're giving us free food and we're sitting there doing tricks for them each day, but we're stuck in this little harbor or port or whatever you want to call it. And if we start to realize, well, I don't want to live like that. I want to be free and I want to leave. I don't want to be an intellectual slave for the extraterrestrials. That means that you're going to have to leave their system and fend for yourself on your own and start going to other extraterrestrial systems or whatever else is out there in outer space, which you can imagine is a fish leaving a harbor and having to go out into the wild ocean. You got to find your food every day. You got to keep from being eaten by sharks and whatever. It's probably extremely difficult, even though you're free. So you can see how a lot of people are going to want to be like that dolphin in the sense that, you know, life's pretty much taken care of for you. And it's a lot more difficult to be free. And I think that's part of the quandary Earthlings are going to discover once we realize what's going on. So the biggest thing right now is all you can do is you can theorize in your mind what might it be like and try and comprehend how are they actually using us as slaves on Earth currently versus how different will it be in the future. You know, to me it's, you know, they may have us building spaceships and, you know, who knows, we could be doctors and all these other things that we're doing on Earth, on other planets. But at the same time, we may not have as much control over our destiny because we're nothing more than a bunch of people in a society that's being directed by them.
Well, I hate to interrupt you, but we do have to go to our first commercial break. So you guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after these messages.
Looking for nighttime adventure? Old school radio that delves into everything out of the norm? Then check us out at Spaced Out Radio. This is Dave Scott. Every Monday through Friday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we're going to take you on a wild ride ranging from conspiracies to true crime and every ghost, alien, and Sasquatch story in between. We're always live, and we're always interactive with you. So join us at spacedoutradio.com, where together, we own the night.
Hey, guess what? You can now get your brand new Spaced Out Radio swag at spacedoutradio.com. We've brought the store back with all new items for you to pick out and pick up for yourself, your family, or friends. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, we got it all. All you have to do is head to our website and click on Store. Choose what you want and it's shipped to you. The Spaced Out Radio store is right there for you. Come shop with us at spacedoutradio.com. Then we can own the night together.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
On the first Tuesday of every month, I encourage you to come along for a journey with me, Geraldine Orozco, on The Spiritual You. Together, we will take a look at how to access the highest expression of yourself and change your life. Consciousness, ET contact, health, and wellness, we can talk about it all. So come along for a spiritual ride with me, Geraldine Orozco, on The Spiritual You, only on Spaced Out Radio.
Coming soon to our website, spacedoutradio.com, is the SOR Space Travelers Club. For just $5 a month, you can get into a private area on our site where you can hang with other listeners in our chat room, post in our forum, and check out a bunch of exclusive content and store that won't be found anywhere else, including a nightly after-show party with Dave. It's going to be the best $5 a month you're going to spend. The SOR Space Travelers, only at spacedoutradio.com.
At spacedoutradio.com, we have a little bit of everything for you to stay up late. So while you're there, check out our SOR Newswire, where our team brings you stories of the weird and strange to the WTF from around the globe. News on Bigfoot, UFOs, paranormal, Darwinian-type crime tales. It's the stories that the mainstream media usually won't touch. Well, we got them all on the SOR Newswire, only at spacedoutradio.com. If you're heading to Vancouver, make sure you stop by the official bar of Spaced Out Radio, the Moose Vancouver. It's the place to party in YVR. At the corner of Nelson and Granville, the Moose Vancouver is always up to speed with a kitchen staff that serves great food. All food on the menu, $6.95 to $8.95. There's a reason the Moose Vancouver is recognized as one of the hottest spots on the West Coast. Get your horns up for the Moose Vancouver.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch. Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
We're bringing scientific thought to the paranormal. Hi there, this is Spaced Out Radio scientist Chris Cogswell. Join me, Chris Zuger, and Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month, where we break down the who from the woo when it comes to everything paranormal. We'll investigate and try to bring sensible answers to those straight and sometimes outlandish questions people have. Hey, not everything has an answer, but we'll do our best. Listen in to Reality Paranormal only on Spaced Out Radio.
Hello, this is your guitar man, Ron Bumblefoot Thal, and I have to tell you, I love the response I get for Little Brother is Watching from Spaced Out Radio fans. It's amazing how music can inspire and make people think deeper about what's going on in the supernatural world. You can head over to my website, bumblefoot.com, to check out my music, my guitar workshops, my touring, even check out some of the hot sauces that I'm working on. And make sure you keep on listening, because with Spaced Out Radio, you know Little Brother is watching.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
You can follow Tessa on Twitter at TessaTNT, on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio, and our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now, back to Spaced Out Weekend host, Tessa Nicole Thomas.
Hear the sound again, voices dancing in my head, smile wide, drowning slowly as the echoes rise.
Welcome back, Space Travelers. It's so great to have you. Tonight we have Richard on, and we are discussing ETs Among Us, as well as alien and UFO disclosure. Hey, Richard, welcome back to the show. So great to have you.
Thanks, Tessa.
So where should we go from here? I'm looking through the comments, seeing what other questions we have. Is there anything we haven't hit on so far that you'd like to discuss?
Well, to me, the two biggest things, one is, people realizing that the possibility exists that humanoid extraterrestrials live among us. In my opinion, I'm talking like more than 10 million potentially, you know. Like I even have a theory that I wrote where I use the analogy of when you're on an airplane, the FAA requires you to have one person for every 50 people on the plane to keep the plane under control. And so I'm using the analogy of Earth as an airplane. And so the humanoid extraterrestrials living among us would need to have enough of them down here to manage Earth and control Earth. So they'd have one thing working in their favor, and that they would get what I call a CEA, or a complicit Earthling, to help them. So they pull people aside throughout their lifetime, tell them what's going on. You know, they'd have roles where they would, you know, not tell the truth and help the way they want the planet to be run. But then, you know, if there's 7 billion people on Earth, you would still need, if you use the analogy of it being like an airplane and one for every 50, that would be like over 100 million people. So, you know, I don't think they need that many. But at the same time, I don't think this is something where there's, you know, like 200 of them down here. I think that when you turn on the television set at night and you watch famous people, I think a lot of those famous people are not from Earth. And the Earthlings just have never contemplated that possibility. So that's one thing, being aware of the presence of the HET on the planet. And then the other thing that I don't think anybody really spends any time or has even contemplated or gone over is that if you go back and you study the history of ufology and you just use the first nationally known sighting when Ken Arnold said he saw some flying discs up in Washington, and then you had Roswell a couple years later, and Edward Ruppelt in the Air Force came out with the term UFO. So in my opinion, the problem that the ufologists have is that back in that era in the late 40s, early 50s, where jets had basically just started to come around, we really didn't understand that much about what flying was. But to use the term unidentified flying objects, we've pretty much just presumed all throughout history, sort of like how we presume that everybody on Earth is an Earthling. We're presuming that these vehicles are flying. And so when you spend a little bit of time studying some of the terminology in addition to UFO, like they use the term UAP for unidentified aerial phenomenon because they're starting to try to get away from UFO. Well, even that term, UAP, says that it's aerial in nature, and aerial has to occur within our atmosphere. So a UAP can't leave our atmosphere. So both a UFO and a UAP don't function out in outer space in terms of terminology describing what's going on. So nobody's really paying attention to the technical descriptions that the terminology are using in terms of what's going on. So what I did is I came up with the term vectating for vectored levitation. So when you see these things and they rise horizontally off the ground and they're using gravitational wave propagation, similar to they're mimicking the celestial bodies in the sense the way Earth goes around the sun, it's using the gravitation of the sun to maneuver itself. So they're basically doing that, except that they have one more level of functionality where they can vector that to control the direction that they want to travel in. So the term for what they're doing is vectating, which is short for vectored levitation. So they're not even flying. Well, so to me, that's another one of the things that there's two big things. People on Earth are not all from Earth, and these vehicles that we're running around calling UFOs aren't actually flying. So right off the bat, you can just tell whenever you hear somebody in a conversation say, oh, ET or UFO, that person has only gone to the second level, what I call subnation. They've gotten past misdirection. They realize society's lying to them. They're starting to pick up on, oh, ET and UFO must exist. But they haven't taken that final step to get to I-nation or intellectual dissemination, where they've figured out what's going on and they can talk among other people intellectually at a higher level, that no, it's HET live among us and CTVs vectate above us. So those 8 words right there are basically the key to what's going on Earth, in my opinion, obviously.
Do you believe that pyramids and other structures were assisted by aliens, or do you think it's kind of like the whole Ed Leedskalnin effect as far as gravitational pull? Some people don't believe that gravitation exists and it's just magnetism, and there's certain ways that you can do it during certain lunar effects. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I think basically when you talk about pyramids, my opinion of the pyramids is, and this is another unique thing that I've never seen anybody point out on the planet before. I think that they put all these stories down on the planet about, who built them and all these other, how did they build them and all this other stuff. To me, the real reason isn't that they built them or how they built them. It's why they put them on the planet. And if you go and you study back in the 1800s when the gold rushes were taking place in California, there was a phenomenon where if you were out and you found gold in like a little cave or what you would want to turn into a gold mine of your own, you would have to leave to go back into town and claim it and get the tools and all the things to go back out and start mining it. Well, so the way that you would define that little area that you had discovered the gold at is you would go and you would build a little pyramid of rocks right by the entrance to it. And so there's actually cases of law back in the 1800s where those little mini pyramids would prove who had the rights to these gold mines. So what I'm saying is that the extraterrestrials, the reason why you're seeing those pyramids all over Earth is depending on what, how like the ones out in the Giza pyramid are aligned to the Orion's belt. I think that what they've done is they've essentially placed the pyramids on Earth as little planetary identification markers to show other extraterrestrial civilizations this is their humanoid slave mine, or a humine, or however you want to call it, where they're mining the Earthlings as the resource, and those pyramids are what prove that it gives them the right to the planet and to mine the humans. So that's my opinion. I mean, I think that they helped the Earthlings build them. I think what they do is they just park the vehicles over the area where they want to build it at night, and they change the forces underneath the vehicle to make it so you can pick up really heavy rocks easily. But, I mean, that's just my speculation. I don't know. To me, the bigger thing isn't how did they build them. It's the fact that they put them here just to begin with, and that shows me that they've been here and that they're using us as their slaves. Well, so that gets back to, I've studied a lot of the different opinions that people offer in terms of what's going on. And to me, I just leave it at TET and HET. I'm sure these beings have a ton of abilities, some of which have been described, others probably we still don't even know about yet. But I don't try and define, are they hybridized, shape-shifting, all the other things. All I do is make one differentiation. When you look at a being, can you identify it as extraterrestrial? Can anybody on the planet look at it and say that thing is extraterrestrial, then it's a TET? If you can't, the only other possibility is you have HET living among us, and currently it's very difficult to point out who one might be. I could give you some examples how in history I've started trying to teach myself who they are. For example, are you familiar with Isaac Newton, the guy that came up with the laws of physics? So basically my theory is that all these extraterrestrials existed before Earth did, and they scripted this whole extraterrestrial architecture out, and they all have roles that they play when they come down here. Well, so part of the things that they do is they leave these little hidden clues on the planet so we can see that they've been here. Well, so when you can say a person's name throughout history that everybody can pretty much instantly recognize, and they played a huge role in changing the course of events on the planet, there's a high probability that that person would be an HET. Well, so then you can do things like you can look at, for example, with Newton, his last name Newton, when you respell it, it spells not new. So what that says is that to him, the laws of physics are not new because he knew what they were before Earth existed, when he sat there with these other people creating this script for the extraterrestrial architecture, and he chose the name Newton to be the name he was going to use down here, so that after disclosure, this conversation that you and I are having, all the rest of the people on Earth, as they're becoming more aware of what's going on, are going to be explained things like this, saying, hey, look at Newton. His name says not new. That's his little clue that he's leaving to show that he was a humanoid extraterrestrial and he was down here before. So that's more what I try and look at in terms of how is disclosure going to take place, what are the clues they're going to look for us. I'm sure they'll probably, once society settles down and becomes adjusted and we move on to the next phase of post-disclosure and what life's going to be like, you'll probably be able to go like going to college or some technical course and start learning about, well, I want to be able to shapeshift, or I want to get into all these other, I want to do telekinesis or mental telepathy or all these other extraterrestrial abilities. And they'll be teaching people how to do them and letting you do them, and maybe based on what you are doing for them, if you're behaving or whatever. So I don't know. It's not that I disagree with anything he's saying. I think all that and more is happening. I just don't focus on it because there's so much to focus on. You can become, it's like walking into a cafeteria and there's so much there. How do you pick what you want to choose from? So what I do is I try and narrow my focus down to HET and CTVs and how is disclosure going to take place. Because if we focus on that one thing and we get that to happen sooner, all the other questions can be answered that we want answered. If we don't get disclosure, we're basically stuck on their timeline with them sitting here spinning us stories every day and making us watch new TV show after TV show and new news item and all this other stuff, and we never are getting the concrete answers that we want. So that's, I'm sort of like a person that's trying to figure out what's the fewest number of steps we need to take to get to the finish line.
Sharon's asking in the chat room, what are planetary identification markers and where are they?
Well, so planetary identification marker is a term that I use to be synonymous with a pyramid. So I would say like the pyramids at Giza, any prominent, if you do a search on Google and you look up just type in the word pyramid, I mean, there's a ton of pyramids all around the planet, but the ones that are more prominent, obviously the ones in Egypt, the Giza pyramid is the most renowned, most well-known ones, but I know they have them in South America and other places throughout the planet. They're just not quite as, well-known. But so to me, those are all examples of planetary identification markers where extraterrestrials took part in building them on the planet, and they left them there for the purpose of, my guess is if you took celestial navigation and aligned I bet they all aligned to star systems. I'll bet none of them are just arbitrarily plopped in the middle of nowhere for no reason. I'll bet they all have some sort of, like a geological engineering from an extraterrestrial viewpoint. They all have a very specific, highly technical positioning that Earthlings probably would have a difficult time even doing today, and this was done thousands of years ago. So to me, those are just more examples of their extraterrestrial intellect being employed on the planet.
So Solar Rocker is saying, $1 million question, and I hope you have a sense of humor, as I do. How many gnomes fit in Richard's pocket?
How many gnomes?
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't even know what is a gnome.
It's a little tiny guy with a pointed hat.
I've heard the word, yeah. I had this guy that I talked to who was, he had this thing about, I can't even think what they were called. What's the elves? He was convinced that there are elves in this country up in Iceland or something. He had a whole theory about it and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know how many gnomes could fit in my pocket, but I mean, I'm willing to believe that when I grew up, I was pretty strict in my interpretation of how life is. And the more I've come to the conclusion of what's going on has to do with all this stuff with ET, I would be willing to believe almost anything's possible. So if you tell me there's gnomes, I wouldn't be surprised at all if there are.
Yeah, me either. I've seen so many things, and one time I was laying in bed at my sister's house, and she lived up Wildcat Canyon in Arkansas, and I'm laying in bed and I'm hearing this noise in the kitchen, and I'm looking because I'm thinking, hey, my sister's getting up, we're going to play Scrabble or something. And I see these two little guys, and they're walking along this shelf, and one sits down and he's kicking his little feet back and forth, and the other one comes up behind him and tries to push him off, and he catches himself, and he gets back up, and they're like kind of fighting about themselves, like play fighting or whatnot. But I think those were the takers, the ones that would take our lighter or our keys or whatever else we're looking for during the day and hide them, or your socks from the dryer. You know how you have two that you put in but only one comes out, different things like that. And so I was just like watching these guys play, and I sat up to get out of bed, so that lost my view. And once I went out there to try to confront them, they were gone. And I'm like, I wasn't high at the time, I wasn't drunk, I wasn't anything. Like, you know, I've always been up until about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning ever since I was a kid due to paranormal experiences that I had. So I was like, man, I just saw the takers or the little people or whatever. They were only about a foot tall. So that was pretty intriguing to me. Like, what the heck is that? But yeah, perhaps they could have been gnomes, or maybe they were just little people, or they looked exactly like people, but they were just smaller.
I've got two other, this doesn't really have as much to do with my theory, but it has to do with extraterrestrials just in general. I have two theories that I'm convinced, like, some of the movies that we're seeing produced on Earth, whereas we think everything's, they've got really advanced CGI and all this ability to make these really high-tech movies. I'm convinced some of the movies are being filmed on other planets, you know, because in my opinion, you have people that are going back and forth between other planets every day, and we just don't know it. And so some of the filming is actually taking place on other planets with their lives, and we just think it's a Hollywood movie set that it was shot on. Right. And the other thing where it gets even more bizarre is I'm convinced that they have the technology where, because they created human life, they know exactly how every aspect of our mind and our body works. So when we're dreaming, I'm convinced that they can produce what would be like a Hollywood movie set, for lack of a better way to describe it. But what it would do is it would interface with our minds during the dreams. So it'd be similar to, have you ever seen the movie Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio?
Yes.
It'd be kind of like that in the sense that as you're sitting there dreaming, the dream that you're having is actually taking place in full physical reality on this, probably on another planet, on this really advanced, like a movie stage, and the aliens, whether they're beings or humanoid extraterrestrials or whatever, are interacting with you in your dream. So you know how when you have your dream, kind of like weird things happen that you couldn't normally recreate in normal life. Well, so they're like mentally trying to promote you to do something in the dream, and you're trying not to do it, or you want to do something and they're trying to prevent you to do it, and they're creating all this stimulation in your mind. So you know, like people say, I had this this premonition in a dream last night, and it gave me this idea to do this. And I'm convinced all throughout history, in addition to mental telepathy and thought projection and other things they can do, part of the way that they interface with us is they interact in our dreams at night. And so they have a whole, you know, like for an extraterrestrial, it might be like, you know how we go to Magic Mountain or Disneyland or somewhere for a day's excitement? They might sit there and go, hey, let's go be in this person's dream tonight. And so if you're dreaming, and like, this is kind of a crazy analogy, but like, let's say you were going to make like a car crash happen, and they're stuck in the car, they have to get out of the way of the car crash. So it's kind of like for them, it would be this really intense, exciting, out of control thing, because they wouldn't have any real control over it, because your mind would just be dreaming it and projecting it, and they would have to be dealing with it physically. So anyway, that's just, I mean, a real out there theory that I have. I try and stay focused more with those other things I talk about. But I mean, like what the guy said about gnomes, and like I said, I've talked to people who believe in elves. I'm convinced that to me, it really comes down to, they could probably create and do anything. It's more a question of, do they want to allocate the time and resources to managing whatever it is that they're dreaming up doing? Because they have the ability, but then is it really worth doing it?
Megan was saying UAP pre-exists UFO term. UFO was a media manufactured term.
My understanding is that UFO came from, there's even other people, basically Edward Ruppelt in like 1951, 52 with the Air Force, and that UAP came from Dr. Richard Haynes, who I'd have to go back to another page and try and actually get the thing, but my understanding was that that's a much more recent term. I could probably have that answer for you in a little while here, but I don't have it sitting in front of me. But so to me, it doesn't really matter when the terms came about. To me, they're both not technically accurate. UFO, one, because I don't think the vehicles are flying, because you can't fly in outer space. And then UAP, because they leave the aerial realm. And so what I've done is, like, I came up with terms UAEP, meaning unidentified aerial phenomenon, or UASP for unidentified astral phenomenon. So, you know, have you heard of the astral realm, where paranormal and psychic and all this stuff is supposed to take place?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've done is I've come up with a term instead of astral, astral for stars, and so that it has the same suffix of aerial, to focus solely on the aviation-related phenomenon that goes on in outer space. And the reason being is that it allows a person to sit there and say UAP, and then if the thing leaves the aerial realm and goes into outer space, you have a term now that you can use when it's in outer space. Because to me, when I'm sitting here and I listen to people saying, oh, that's a UFO at the moon, to me, right away, I know, well, that's not possible. The person doesn't understand you can't fly in outer space. And when they say it's a UAP, it shows me that they don't understand that the term UAP is only available in the Earth's atmosphere, and these vehicles originate outside the Earth's atmosphere, and when they leave, they go outside of it too. So both those terms don't really work.
So BTO is asking, Richard, who do you feel actually created humans?
So I would, well, that's another kind of a difficult thing, because the term human, there are human extraterrestrials. Like, human is just a body form, the humanoid container that we're in. But I would say that extraterrestrials created Earthlings in the sense that before Earth existed, they designed all of our lives. And to me, and it's not a religious statement, I say we're in a spiritual form, and then our parents are like vessels that provide the interaction to bring the physical body in place, and the extraterrestrials put our spirits into that when we're conceived. And so to me, when we die, we don't really die, our bodies die, and then they take us and they do what I call polymorphing, where they put us in a new body on another planet and continue to use us, which is how life normally works on other planets. So this whole thing that we've been told on Earth that we die isn't really an accurate statement. And when you go back and you hear about reincarnation and read the Bible with people saying that Jesus brought people back to life, and I'm not trying to be an advocate or, yes or no for religion. I'm just trying to use it as a basic. I think that you hear those stories on the planet for a reason, because when we realize that there are people alive on other planets who we thought were dead, we're going to be really shocked, and that's going to help to stabilize the people's minds on Earth, because they've heard the possibility of it. They just don't believe it's true.
All right, and so I'm looking for more questions. Somebody said swear jar, which I don't even know who swore. I don't remember either one of us swearing. So Megan is asking, how is a petition going to achieve disclosure?
So the idea for the petition comes from, there was a guy, Steve Bassett, who came up with a petition probably about 10 years ago approximately, that he put on a We the People petition site that the United States government offers, where they say if you get so many signatures, they will answer the petition. Well, so right away the thing got around 10,000 petitions, and they answered it saying, no, ET doesn't exist, and they deleted the petition from the site. So I got the idea that Steve had the right idea. The problem is, one, don't put it on a government petition server because then they control it. So I put this one on the change.org site so that I control it, so I can keep it going. And then the other thing I did was I looked at the way Steve wrote his, where he's saying that, it's a truth embargo and extraterrestrials are engaging us. And so to me, using the terms ET and UFO isn't being technically accurate as to what is going on. So by using the terms HET and CTV in place of ET and UFO, it's more technically accurate. And what I'm really trying to do is, first and foremost, if the public would just read the petition and become intellectually aware of what it says and what's going on, that will have more of a profound effect than if a lot of people signed it and it was presented to the government and the military and stuff like that in terms of trying to get them to disclose it. Because even if people are signing it, and like you get me on mainstream media and I'm able to publicly start explaining it a larger, kind of like if this is like a grassroots effort and more people are hearing about and stuff like that. Back to my analogy of, you could take a 14 or 15-year-old kid that doesn't even have a driver's license, and he could be speaking at a technically higher accurate level that these vehicles are vectating, they're not flying, and yet you'd be listening to the top, most highly regarded aviation experts on Earth who are saying that they're UFOs, which is totally inaccurate. So the goal of the petition is to elevate the public's awareness of what's going on so that they have control over the narrative. They can at least talk about what's actually happening, whether the government or military will admit it or not. And in my opinion, if enough people are doing that, and then obviously if enough people sign it and mainstream media picks up on it, it will force the government and the military to come forward and admit what's going on, instead of requiring us to just sit here and wait for what I call CTAD, or the Scheduled Extraterrestrial Architecture Disclosure, that they plan on having occur, who knows when, but that's right now all we're stuck with and all we're going to get. So I'm simply trying to take something that I saw that when Steve Bassett put his petition out there, that it seemed like he had the right idea, it just needed to be fine-tuned a little bit and then also put on a different server. So, for example, his had been around for a decade now. Imagine how many signatures that thing would have collected had it still been in play. So, that's the purpose in the petition, obviously, to work like a petition and try and get it presented if it can get enough signatures, but more importantly, to elevate the awareness to the public so that they can take back control of the narrative instead of just being told every day what's going on.
So, Kevin is asking, well, at first he says, great job, you two. And then he says, Tessa, what type of scenario do you and Richard feel it will be on the day they fully reveal their presence? What will be the sequence of events of the rollout?
Do you want me to give you my opinion?
Yes, you go first.
Well, so if my theory of trying to get the public to, which I'll have to be honest, I find it hard to believe that you can get 7 billion plus people to all realize what's going on and, change their terminology and concepts. And I don't think it's impossible, but I think it's difficult to see that happening. But if that doesn't happen in this thing, what I call scheduled extraterrestrial architecture disclosure takes place, in my personal opinion, I think it's going to occur on a Tuesday morning, because it's going to create some chaos on the planet no matter what. The best time to have chaos take place is on Tuesday morning, because if you have it occur on Monday morning, things aren't working because everybody, as well as they normally are, because everybody's just getting into work, they're trying to catch up from the weekend, they're trying to, what's going on. So you're not like operating like on all cylinders like a fine oil machine or whatever. By Tuesday morning, you're all caught up, you're ready to go, things are moving along, and you've got the next 3 days before the Friday evening, before things close down for the weekend, to start to try to deal with the reality of what's taking place. So in my opinion, they would do it on a Tuesday morning, my guess is they probably just come forward and start making announcements, and they probably have some plan in terms of, like, you hear people saying, oh, aliens are going to attack Earth and all this other thing. I don't think they really want to turn the place into a mass chaotic battlefield where people are being harmed in a way that appears to them to be reckless and unnecessary. I think they first want to try and see if they can verbally create a discussion that's taking place and try and get as many people on the planet to, like I say, this whole thing of subnating us and getting us prepared so that we won't be panicking and running around like chickens with our heads cut off, and we'll be like, God, we've been waiting for decades. We all know this. I mean, it's about time. Okay, fine, tell us. We'll basically be sitting there, ready for it. It's like going to a restaurant and ordering, and we've been waiting for our meal to get brought to us forever.
Right.
So that's what I'm thinking is going to be their initial attempt, and then based on how the people on the planet start responding. The other thing is I think they need to get it to happen fairly quickly. This isn't like a multi-year transition where they're going to want to start taking us through first grade, second grade. They want to start doing this in days and have the people accept and realize that a whole new way of life is about to take place, and we may not like it, but you're better off dealing with it and not revolting against it, because you're just going to end up getting yourself and people around you injured. And in time, we'll just have to work out it won't be pleasant, but that's a better option than any other option I can think of. And if the people of Earth, the majority of them freak out and go crazy, then, who knows, maybe they'll start doing things like implementing, I use another analogy. It's like if you're going to herd the Earthlings, it's like herding cattle. If you point to them, here's the gates, this is where you guys need to go, and they start, like when you're herding cattle, they make voice commands and stuff like that to try and get them to go. And only the ones that try and break from the group do they pull out the cattle prods to force them to go back in that direction. And most of the people are going to be smart enough, in my opinion, you're not going to want to get injured any more than you need to, so you're better off just, going with the way that it's going to go. That's my guess. But then again, that's just a theory or an opinion. I don't, I've thought about it, what I think it might be like. I try to imagine what they're trying to accomplish and look at it from their viewpoint.
For me, I don't know if there's like any perfect time for such things to happen, but I'm like, hump day! It's the middle of the week. Let's put this, certain scenario in front of people. They're done with the beginning of the week. They're ready for the end of the week. Perhaps it would be hump day. On the other hand, I'm thinking perhaps Saturday or Sunday, but hump day is my number one vote. Because they're past the beginning of the week, heading into the end of the week, and kind of open to anything, basically. But for me, being a believer, I mean, my dad, he's the first one who brought up aliens and such to me, and I had never heard anything about it until my dad told me when I was about 12 or 13 years old, and I'm like, really? What the heck is he talking about? And we had a yard sale, and one of the books that we sold was a book on aliens. I don't know if it was National Geographic or... Man, I'd have to go grab it off my bookshelf, but I grabbed it from the yard sale, and I was like, I need this book. And so I read it and caught up on it, and later on in life, when I was about, let's say, about 29 or so years old, I actually had my first alien encounter as far as UFOs. And I actually have pictures of UFOs in the sky from my backyard. I wasn't looking for UFOs. I was trying to take pictures of the moon and Perseids and so on and so forth, and I actually captured these UFOs around the cloud lines and such. Like they're trying to camouflage themselves, but it's not working. And then just recently I saw pictures of it that looked exactly like the ones that I had, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. So I was very interested and intrigued, but being that all these different things are coming out, like Ancient Aliens and Unsolved Mysteries back in the day, and all these other shows trying to soften our minds to disclosure, and the government finally giving us disclosure, which I don't know if they'll ever do it. I think they kind of try to hide too much. And I know the government has had agreements with them, how many people they can take, where and who they can take, or so on and so forth. I don't know, it's just really strange and intriguing to me how they can even do this. It's kind of going against the grain of staying as one and allowing these outside and outward entities to come in and take advantage of us, to do testing or whatever the heck they're doing. Is it perhaps because they put us here in the first place? Are we a petri dish that they're trying to test over and over again and see how far we've come? Like, what the crack is going on? I'm not really exactly sure, but I don't know. I'm very open to it, and I wish disclosure would happen already. I'm ready for it. I'm not going to go running for the hills or the mountains of the La Platas when it happens. I'm going to be here at my home, and my kids even have had different dreams, and I don't know if they're dreams because just recently I'm working night security, and I always call my kids at night to say goodnight, have sweet dreams, stay cuddly warm, yada yada. My kids are telling me about this dream. At first they told me weeks before, I had this dream about this UFO craft in the backyard, and it was behind the trees, and there's lights, and I went on there, and then I was scared, and so on and so forth. But then, this last week, they came on, and they were telling me that they both had the same dream. First, Lily was telling me, Mom, I had this dream, this UFO came, and I went on, and there was aliens, and Floyd was there too, and I tried to run away, and this and this and that and that, and Floyd tripped, and Floyd was like, I didn't trip, you tripped. And so they started to coalesce on their dream, and their dreams actually were the same. They had the same exact dream. And Lily thought he tripped, he thought she tripped, and then she was like, remember when you jumped on the alien's head? And they both started laughing at the same time, and he's like, yeah, that was really funny. And so they had the same exact dream, and it makes me wonder, were they actually having a dream, or was this an actual happening?
You mean like a thought projection into their minds, or actual physical activity that they were a part of?
An actual physical activity that they were a part of, because they'd had several dreams of a UFO in the backyard, and then all of a sudden they're having the same dream of the UFO in the backyard.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, because when you think about it, extraterrestrials could probably easily interact with certain, especially like a child who doesn't have a sense of what's, it's just an event. They're not like us, where we would define this event as earthly and this event as extraterrestrial. So it's very possible they could just sit there and do something during the day or night, and to them it's just a normal daily just occurred in their life. Because they don't really see that differentiation. So I see your point. It could be, and I certainly wouldn't be surprised if that's going on Earth.
Yeah, a lot of times people think it's just a dream, but when you're having the same dream, it kind of brings it to reality. Like, this could actually be happening, because my 3-year-old and my 6-year-old are telling me the same dream that they had the same night. And, once one brings up a point, they both start laughing, and she's like, oh yeah, I remember when you jumped on that alien's head, and so on and so forth. Like, it was pretty interesting and intriguing to me. And all of my kids are gifted. I was gifted. My mother was gifted. Who knows who before her was gifted, because my grandparents always denied any spiritual or anything like that happening. But it was interesting to me, like, was this a dream, or did this actually happen? My son, he's got 2 thumbs on his right hand. And the doctors were like, you got to take that off. This and this and that and that. And I'm like, I'm not going to take that off. I've read all the studies. If I take that off, it's going to weaken his hand, and he won't have the full use of his hand. If I leave it there, his hand's going to be really strong, and who knows, he could be the next greatest pitcher or basketball player, or who knows what he can do. Football, throw a football. I'd rather he not play football because it's kind of dangerous, but I mean, there's so many things that he can do. And for them to have the very same dream and to be talking about it in front of me on the phone, like, I didn't trip, you tripped, and remember when the aliens came out and you jumped on his head, and they both started laughing, and they're like, yeah, that was so funny, and then we both ran away, and I don't know. I don't know if it's because they were spiritually gifted and they were able to overcome, unlike other people who are kind of spiritually weakened and can't overcome them because they have this kind of frozenness and zombie-like thing, like mentality going on. I don't know what exactly is happening, but to me, when they said that, I'm like, man, this is a real occurrence. It's not like everyday dreams that they tell me all the time. This is something that they shared. A shared dream, actually a reality, going on in our backyard. And we've had several weird things happening here. So it makes me wonder, did they actually have an alien encounter?
Yeah, there's when you use the term shared dreams, I bet if you go on the internet, I bet there's a whole community of people who talk about experiencing something similar like that. And then, I mean, like you described, I wouldn't be surprised at all. That's kind of like this whole thing. When you were saying earlier, you can't wait for disclosure. I can't wait for it either, because I'm tired of hearing all these things that I want to know. I know there's more going on this planet than just normal day-to-day life, and we don't get the answers to it. And I want to know what are all these things? What are the possible capabilities of what they're doing, and what's, aside from why they're doing it, I just want to know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was the first thought that came to me when, I saw this alien orb coming from the rally, and it was my 2 daughters, and I was pregnant with my son, and my youngest daughter at the time was like, Mom, what is that? What is that? And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, there's this light in the sky, and it's following us. And so I stopped at the stop sign from Rainbow Road going into Bayfield, and I hopped out of my Gran Torino, and I'm looking up in the sky, and she's like, Mom, please get in. I just want to go home. I just want to go home. And I'm like, let me look. And I look up, and there's this little ball that looked like it had fire inside of it. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And she's like, Mom, can you please just take me home? And I'm like, okay, I'll get in. I'll take you home. After my son was born, he was about a month-old. Again, I saw the same thing, but it was lower in the atmosphere. It was actually, about 3 or 4 foot off the ground, going along my back fence at a slow walking pace. And I'm sitting there thinking of Dylan Redwine, which was he was a friend of my daughter, Kinsey, and he had gone missing on Thanksgiving break. And I'm holding my son, it was December sometime, looking out into the cold horse field in the backyard, thinking, I hope that he just took him and hid him. I hope wherever he's at, he's warm and safe, and I hope he'll be brought back home someday. And I see, all of a sudden, this orb coming along the back fence. And like I said, it was at a slow walking pace, and it looked like liquid fire within it. And it was about 3 or 4 feet in circumference or diameter, however you say it. And I put my son down on the couch, and I get up, and I'm trying to get my phone open. I had a flip phone at the time. I couldn't get it open, and so I was like, okay, so if I can't get this open and get a picture, let me get witnesses. So I called my husband and my 2 daughters over. I was like, you guys got to come see this. I opened the door, I stepped out, and as soon as I stepped out, I was thinking, I need to be here for my kids. I don't know what this thing is going to do. So I stepped back in, closed the door, and we're all crowded around this sliding glass door, and myself and my 2 daughters saw the same thing. This orb with liquid fire in it, orange, yellow, and red, flowing clockwise. And then my husband, inside this orb, he saw the orb, but inside of it he saw a bat, a glowing bat flapping its wings at a very slow rate of speed. So it was interesting that we both saw 2 different things, as well as my kids. And it didn't try to hide or anything. It just continued along the fence line, went behind the blue spruce trees, which are probably like 200 years old, and disappeared. I still wish I would have gotten a picture of it, but at least I had witnesses to corroborate what I had seen.
Yeah, I've seen lots of videos of things like you're describing, like light phenomena and stuff like that. And I find that stuff really interesting too, because it sort of defies all the current, I don't know if I'm going to call it laws of physics or whatever. It doesn't really make any sense how it could function like that. But it's not a spacecraft in the same sense.
I think they're kind of like spycraft.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's like this whole thing of the reason why I focus on such a small spectrum of these things and trying to force disclosure is that I want disclosure to occur so much, because I want to be able to ask somebody, what are these things? What is going on? What are you guys capable of doing? how do we differentiate between a spacecraft and a ball of light in the sky? What are you trying to accomplish, and what's the physical properties of how does it do that? And I mean, it drives me crazy every day to be in a society where clearly these things are going on, and then you turn around and you look at the government and the military, and they just act like, what are you guys, are you crazy? What are you talking about? We don't even know anything about that stuff. And say, oh, please. So you have to maintain a sense of sanity just to, like, deal with it on a daily basis. So, yeah, I mean, hearing it and seeing videos and all these other things, that, to me, I want disclosure so bad just so that I can sense that I'm living in a world where at least I understand what's going on. I may not like it. Maybe I will or won't have control over it. But at least if I can understand it, you know, right now I feel like I'm in, like, somebody's magic show, and I don't understand how he's doing the you know, like the Wizard of Oz on it's just like the planet is operating beyond our realm of understanding, and I just hate living in an environment like that.
And Brave Sir Robin was saying there are underwater pyramids. What are their uses?
Yeah, I've seen things about that too. I mean, that I have even less, other than to say, again, it's an opinion, or it's a pyramid, so maybe it has some similar reasoning, but the fact that it's underwater, was it built during a time when it wasn't underwater, or did they, it kind of gets, you know, have you heard about the UFOs that go underwater, the USOs? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if extraterrestrials have the ability to do basically anything that you can do on land, they can probably do in the ocean as well. You know, they probably conquered all the physics involved, because basically all water is just molecules like air, and they know how to manipulate everything. So maybe they're just showing us other examples of their extremely advanced capabilities, whereas Earthlings appear to be so primitive because we were never given all the abilities and taught what's going on, and we have to keep, you know, crawling along basically, whereas it's almost like they're down here trying to show us how superior they are.
So you haven't had any UFO sightings or alien or UFO experiences?
Well, in my whole life, I definitely would say I've never had a UFO. I've seen things down that I think are like those light orbs that you see down at the beach at night. But I definitely wouldn't say that I've ever seen. I've seen tons of videos of what are, to me, extraterrestrial spacecraft operating in, you know, fashions that are not beyond the realm of Earthling physics and stuff, with military fighter aircraft in the same frames and seeing stuff like that. But in my real life, I've never seen them. And then in terms of beings, the thing that got me back on the thing is that when I would talk to some of those pilots back in the 80s, I was convinced that some of those people that I was talking to were these, what I call HETs, because when I would talk to them, I remember leaving the conversations going, that is the weirdest guy I've ever met in my whole life. And I couldn't put a reasoning on it at the time, but I kind of felt like there's nothing in my whole life that would explain the sensation that I got from talking to that person. They were really, like, they put off a vibe that was so bizarre. And so then as I started theorizing, well, what if a being from another planetary system came down here and he was a pilot? Well, the first place the pilots are going to want to go is to the fighter weapons school, because that's where all the best pilots are. So that's maybe start to think, oh, well, that would be one of the places you would run into them at. So, but I mean, I've never had a person come up to me and say, yes, I'm a humanoid extraterrestrial, or I've never met a being that's like a gray or any of these other things that aren't in humanoid form. For me, it's been more of an intellectual journey where I grew up, didn't have any interest in it, had this moment where I started to contemplate, why will the military not explain this stuff? And simply because I have a higher level understanding of aviation than most people, it enabled me to sit there and start asking questions and being able to generate answers that they wouldn't disclose, but that I could figure out. And, you know, so that's pretty much what got me down this road. But so I'm different from most people in the sense I wouldn't say I've ever been an experiencer or a contactee, or I've never looked up in the sky and seen a spacecraft, and had that been the moment that clicked for me, it was more just an intellectual moment where I went, they're lying to me, and I can't tell for 100% sure right now why, but if I spend enough time and put my mind to it, I can figure it out.
So Bougie in the chat room was saying, so the USOs can't be the same craft as the UAPs because UAPs can't swim and USOs can't fly.
Well, so this gets back into when you're using the terminology, I would say that the vehicle, you might want to quantify it as a UAP when it's in the atmosphere, and then when it would go into the ocean, you're right, it would become a USO, so it would be the same vehicle, but the terminology would change based on the medium that it's operating in. And so part of the conflict I have with all the people who are, I guess, are calling themselves ufologists, or all the people in this thing, is they're not using, I mean, I've run into people who sit there and say, it's a UFO everywhere, even when it's in the water. And it's like, well, it can't fly in the water. And well, it doesn't matter. It's just the terminology has morphed into, it is what it is. Like, let's not get technical about it. And I go, well, if you don't get technical about it, you're not going to be able to resolve it. And so I'm like the exact opposite. You have to be extremely technical and precise. And when you are, you're capable of speaking basically in extraterrestrial, explaining what's going on. Whereas when you just run around all day going, oh, everything's a UFO, everything's a UAP, everything's just this term, you're not really that's why we've gone 75 years since Roswell and we can't figure out what's going on, because everyone's just calling everything in the sky a UFO. And another, to give you an example, most people just sit there, and as soon as you say something's in the sky, they automatically just say it's flying. No one ever spends any time trying to, like, if I took a rock and I threw the rock through the air, they go, the rock's flying through the air. And so I get where you're coming from. Like, if you and I are just sitting there at a bar someday having a drink, eating lunch or whatever, and we're saying, hey, the rock's flying through the air, or like the saying time is flying, it's a saying. People, you're right. It works. I get it. We're just having a casual conversation. The rock's flying through the air. Time is flying. Everything flies. But when you're sitting here and you're trying to figure out why are these vehicles flying through our airspace and our military pilots can't identify them and intercept them, and you're trying to resolve this extraterrestrial UFO phenomenon, and the military won't support us and give us the answers we need and help us, and they're the ones that gave us the term back with Edward Ruppel back in the 50s, to me, you have to be willing to take it to the next level during certain moments and speak more technically accurately. More, it's kind of like, you know, when you go to work, you have to do things differently than when you're at home, and so trying to resolve this phenomenon requires more stricter use of terminology. Most people don't like that. Most people want this just to be simple. Why can't we just say they're ET and UFOs and say they exist and be done with it? And I mean, I would love for it to be that way. And the only reason why, to me, it's because it's more complex. And when they do, even if they sat there and said ET and UFO exist, I don't think people have ever really contemplated, well, what does that mean? You're about to have you heard the saying that there are more stars in outer space than there are grains of sand on all the beaches in the world?
Yes.
Well, I don't think the people on Earth have any idea how much information is about to get dumped on their minds when you wake up and realize, and that's just in maybe like the visible universe we can see. My guess is it goes on way beyond that. There are more stars, there are more planets. In my opinion, you're going to find out there are more beings. There are more things going on than the human mind can possibly even process in time. It's just going to be, you know, like they say, like trying to drink water through a fire hose. When the day comes that they start disclosing to us that ET and UFO exist, it is going to be information overload to the maximum.
Right? Our heads are going to explode. And I hate to interrupt, but we do have to go to our second commercial break. So
Okay.
you guys, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after these messages.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for a night on the town? The Moose Vancouver is the bar that never stops rocking until 2 a.m. every night. The Moose has great food with everything on the menu from $6.95 to $8.95. Fantastic, vibrant staff and rock and roll that will bring you back to when the music was real, the hair was long, and the guitars were rockin'. Get your party on at the Moose Vancouver, the official party bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Get your horns up with me on Spaced Out Radio. This is Ron Bumblefoot Thal. Come tune in to SOR where you can hear me rock out with Little Brother Is Watching, the official theme song of Spaced Out Radio. And then come on over to bumblefoot.com where you can find out about my tour schedule, my music, and everything else. Bumblefoot.com keeps you up to date on what I'm doing and the best way to stay in touch with my music and music camps. Sign up for my newsletter at bumblefoot.com and remember, Little Brother Is Watching.
Looking for the stories of the strange and weird that you will find hard to find anywhere else? Check out the SOR Newswire on our website. Our writers, led by Captain Shirk, are scouring the world for the oddest and most bizarre stories we can find. Everything from weird crime to suspenseful and paranormal. We're working hard for you to bring you the most intriguing news of your day. Check out the SOR Newswire at spacedoutradio.com today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Hi there, this is Geraldine Orozco from San Francisco's Bay Area Meditation. I invite you to join me the first Tuesday of every month with Dave Scott for Spaced Out Radio's The Spiritual You. In this fast-paced world we live in, it's time for you to take some time for you. We'll cover every possible subject from powerful meditation to healing techniques to your own intuition and spirituality. So come join us for The Spiritual You.
The freedom to post what you want, when you want. That's the social media freedom you need. Social Media Freedom is the free app in your app store. No need to worry about going to jail or being shadow banned any longer. It's the freedom to say what you feel. The freedom to know Big Brother isn't watching. It's the way social media is supposed to be. Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free. Download from your app store today.
You know, it's hard being the bad man of ufology, but that's just the way that I like it. This is Chris George Zuger, and I'll be hanging out with Dave Scott and SOR scientist Chris Cogswell for Reality Paranormal, the second Wednesday of every month. And our job is to break it down and come to conclusions as to what is really going on in the supernatural world. I'd love for you to join us right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
We are getting ready to relaunch the SOR Space Travelers Club at spacedoutradio.com. For $5 a month, you can join us for a plethora of features found nowhere else. Hang out in a private chat room during the show and after party. You can check out some exclusive content and a store specifically for you, as well as a private listener forum where you can post your thoughts, stories, and pictures. The SOR Space Travelers Club, coming soon to spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. a spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Hi there, this is Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio, and I want you to come on a nightly journey. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, every Monday through Friday, you can come hang out with me and the other space travelers. We have it all from Carl the Alien bouncing on by to those misfit gnomes causing havoc. It's 3 hours of fun and entertainment on those topics the mainstream really doesn't want to touch. Come get all paranormal with us at spacedoutradio.com, and together, my friends, along with our resident guitar god Bumblefoot, we own the night.
Sit back, relax, grab a drink, and listen closely. Spaced Out Radio continues through the weekend. From the mile-high mountains of Colorado to you, listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Weekend with Tessa Nicole Thomas.
So that was our guitar hero, Bumblefoot. We're back with Richard. Richard, welcome back to the show. It's so great to have you on this evening.
Glad to be here, Tessa.
So I think the evening has been going well, and we've been having a lot of awesome questions from our chat room, and I'm scrolling down to find more, but Sharon was asking, are humanoid extraterrestrials living among us? And are we just playing a role to the events of Earth that are scripted?
Yes, I would, in my opinion, they exist before Earth existed. So you've got, like I use the term ESH, extraterrestrial / HET, meaning that outer space is like the ocean. There's a myriad of life forms out there. You know, you hear grays, and like I jokingly say, a 3-foot-tall guy with almond-shaped eyes that's green with antennas. But the one form they have is the humanoid form, that by using us in that form, it enables them to live among us, and we think that they're Earthling. So they sat down and they scripted this whole process of Earth, and all the what we think is evolution is actually their plan, and they're using us to help them build out the Earth, and they have a goal to disclose to us. And then it's just so another. I use a lot of the events on Earth as ways of describing what's going to happen in the future, and you can look back in history and see events on Earth to try to get a sense of why and what's going to happen. So if you remember back to, I think it was like the 1800s when the United States had slaves, and Eli Whitney came out with the cotton gin, and the cotton gin could pick the cotton faster than the slaves did. So all of a sudden, whereas a slave was an asset as a resource to pick the cotton, literally overnight, the industrial age and machinery was going to take hold, and all of a sudden, all these people that they were enslaving who are uneducated were now a liability because they couldn't pick the cotton fast enough as the cotton gin. So they had to figure out what to do with them. So they basically had to free them and educate them so that they could become functioning members of society. Well, so if you look at modern day reality, what I think is going to happen is that the computers on Earth are increasing their technological ability so quickly, and the reason why is because they have computers on other planetary systems that are so advanced if they showed us what they do, we would have a hard time even comprehending and imagining it. Well, ours are going to basically be capable of doing all that stuff. In order to make that happen, they need the people to be smart enough to know how to interact with the computers. So they have to inform us that extraterrestrials exist and make us aware of all this higher form technology. So you can use the analogy of the Earthlings are like the slaves of the 1800s, and the computer is the cotton gin, and disclosure is like the Civil War. Hopefully it won't be as violent, but there's going to be a major societal shift. And that's like an example of how I try and describe it, in the sense that Earthlings are about to wake up one morning to realize that extraterrestrials exist and our lives are going to be vastly different, and they're going to be a lot more information and more technologically advanced than we're aware of. And that's something that, in my opinion, you would want to prepare yourself for, at least in terms of, mentally keeping open the possibility that these things can happen. I don't think going and becoming a prepper and putting a bunch of food in a thing and being prepared to live out in nature is going to solve the problem. I think you and all the people out there are going to have to deal with it, and that's the best way to go about it. But I think the life's going to change drastically for the Earthlings, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I want to take a little pause for the cause and remind everyone, if you do have questions, I know we do have a lot in the chat room, but if you're not in the chat room, please feel free to call with your questions or comments at 970-335-9596. That's 970-335-9596. That being said, BTO is asking, Richard, where does one's soul come into play? Do you feel that our souls were created?
So to me, a soul is synonymous with a spirit. I think that's what we actually are. So I think our bodies are like interface devices that enable us to communicate with each other and interpret information and gather information. So whether you're in a humanoid body form or some of these other body forms that we hear them describe, extraterrestrials like grays or things that don't look humanoid but they're still body forms, I think everything has, whether you want to call it a spirit or a soul, or that's the actual being, whatever that higher level, it's maybe not physical in the sense, and we're going to learn what that is, and we're going to learn how to exist as that without a body on us and stuff like that. That's all part of what's going to happen after disclosure. And yeah, I think they create all that. I mean, basically, I think they've pretty much created everything, and then they just don't tell us. So we're stuck thinking that we've created the stuff that we built on Earth. But I think that we're about to have a whole different perception of, and not to get religious, I think when you say spiritual or soul, to me it's just a way of describing the actual being. The body can die and they can take the spirit or the soul and put it into a new body form, and that's just a total normal way that life is lived out in outer space. And they just didn't tell us that, so we all think that we die on Earth because we haven't been told the true story.
Okay, so I'm reading through the questions, and I actually skipped ahead when I read Nikki's. So I'm looking to see what else we have going on. So Stevie B is asking, does this imply they also spawned other humanoid species? What benefit would they have from creating bonobos?
Well, so I think when you leave Earth and you go to other planetary systems, I would use the analogy of the bar scene in Star Wars, where there's just a ton of different looking beings present in outer space. So some of the people you're going to see are going to be humanoid and they won't be Earthling. So it's just one of the options that they have of a body type that they can be in. Whether or not they create planets that are like Earth, where they put people on them and they don't tell them the truth, and they raise them as like prisoner planets or slave planets or whatever you want to call it. They probably, if they've done it here, they probably do it on other ones too. How many, I don't know. All this gets into like super speculation, because to me it's enough just to say, hey, humanoid extraterrestrials live among us. But yeah, I would be prepared to see some pretty bizarre, amazing, to what us is bizarre and amazing, whereas to them it's going to be ho-hum, boring. In other words, to them what's exciting is Earth, because it's so different than everything that they normally go through and have each day. Whereas to us, it's going to be the exact opposite. Earth is boring, and everything they do is going to be exciting because it'll be new to us.
So Nikki's asking, does Richard have any knowledge as to exactly why the ETs want the humans of this planet to be unaware? Is there an agreement between the government and ETs to deliberately dumb down beings on Earth?
So I would say the reason why they do that, yes, it's intentional because they want us to be intellectual slaves, and the less you know, the more they can control you. The more intellectually aware you become, the harder it is to control somebody. And I would say that all the governments of the world are actually run by the extraterrestrials. They're not run by Earthlings. We think they are because that's what we're told to believe. But I don't, and this is where it gets into having the HET down here. When you turn on the TV and you see people who are representing governments and militaries of the world, it would be easy to have that person not have to be an Earthling, because if you can have a human from another planet down here walking around, we would think that they're an Earthling, and this would be one of the easiest ways for them to rise to power on the planet by taking all the positions of authority and filling them with humanoid extraterrestrials from other planetary systems. So I think that the governments are nothing more than we're told that we're electing these leaders. In reality, it's just them putting themselves in power and misrepresenting themselves.
So Bushi is saying, watch Alternative 3, really weird TV short from 1977 about people going missing after being prospected for highly skilled military jobs in the UK. It's on YouTube, Secret Space Program. Have you heard anything about that?
No, but I mean, I'm convinced they're abducting people off planet Earth. I mean, so this is where it gets kind of bizarre too, is that and people don't like hearing this, but if they technically created us, we are their property. So technically they can do whatever they want with us. Now, I know that's not what people want to hear, and I'm not saying it's right, and it's not like I'm trying to make a moral statement. I'm just trying to make a basic technical statement that it's sort of like if you go buy something from the store and you take it home and you build it and you want to smash it and destroy it, well, it's sort of like it's your right to do it because it's yours. Well, if they want to create people, put them on a planet, lie to them, use them as slaves, abduct some of them, do miserable things to some of them, and be friends and, take good care of other ones and whatever, and do all these different things, to some degree, who are we to say that they can't do it, because it belongs to them. So Earth's theirs, we're theirs. I know that doesn't sound, it's not the type of thing you want to hear, and you don't want to have to see that that's what's going on, but to some degree that may be the first step that we need to accept. And then my whole point of trying to force disclosure is if the Earthlings would all realize that something's going on that's not right, and the Earthlings start to function as an actual group instead of 195 separate countries that all fight among each other, we could collectively then start to try to negotiate and say, hey, we know you're abducting us. We know you're treating some of us really poorly. We know all these things are going on. How do we get it to stop? At least then we would have some sense of a organized mechanism to try to deal with this stuff. Right now, the only thing you've got is a couple people on the fringe, like us sitting here in this paranormal chat discussion, contemplating it. 99% of the people of the planet are sitting there and watching reality TV and, just doing whatever. They're not even aware of the topic or the subject matter. And if you even try to bring it up with them, they'll just sit there and go, oh, you're crazy.
So, Carl is asking, did Richard ever consider that the only people who want disclosure are those who already believe there are ET?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, I would say even the term disclosure itself is just something that's thrown around within that little community of people on the fringe who are looking for the answer, and that's kind of the word that has become the buzzword or the most popular, sort of like UFO and ET. It's become the word that's synonymous with us finding out what's going on. And I think if you went in and you said the word disclosure to most people in general walks of life, they wouldn't even understand what you're talking about or what you're asking for.
So why do you believe that there are alien hybrids on Earth with us? Is there a certain agenda?
Well, to me, it's back to this thing of they use the humanoid body form because we think that it's Earthlings, so we wouldn't guess that that's what's going on. It's like it's their secret weapon, for lack of a better way to describe it. And so, yeah, the fact that they don't identify themselves and disclose that they're here, to me, shows that they have a secret hidden agenda, and that's where I start theorizing and speculating as to what it is based on. It's, as you start evaluating criteria, first, do they exist? Two, are they in the humanoid form and they won't admit it? And then why would they do that? That's where I come up with, well, it's not for a good reason, it's for a nefarious reason. My opinion is one of the main reasons because they want to enslave us.
So Susan is asking, is Richard the only one who uses this terminology?
In public, in 35 years, I'm the first person I've ever seen. I'm the only person I've ever seen in public that uses this terminology in 35 years. Although I'm convinced that there are millions of people on Earth who know it, but won't use it because they don't want the public to know what's going on. So all I'm trying to do is be like a translator or tour guide, for lack of a better way to try to describe it, to point out to people there are key signposts along the road that you're not aware of or not pointing, or people aren't pointing them out to you simply because the words aren't present on Earth for you to see or comprehend the intellectual reality.
And Bougie is saying, so why can't UAP be used for a craft that comes from outer space because you can't fly in space?
So I was looking up, Richard Haynes came up with the term UAP in 1980. The reason why UAP doesn't work in outer space is because the technical definition of UAP is an unidentified aerial phenomenon, and the term aerial takes place in the atmospheric realm, which is the air, basically, between Earth's ground level or sea level and the edge of the atmosphere where it turns into outer space. So within that atmospheric realm or the aerial realm, that's where the term UAP is accurate. As soon as a vehicle would leave that atmospheric realm and go into outer space, the term UAP doesn't apply there. So in my opinion, what's happening is all the ufologists with the term UFO they're paying attention to the U in UFO in terms of unidentified. They don't really, as far as they're concerned, it's okay just to say, hey, we're going to fly to another planet, even though you don't really do that. It doesn't really matter. And it's just like with the term UAP, they're looking at, well, these vehicles, when we're noticing them, are primarily within our atmosphere right in front of us. So let's give them a term that describes that. We don't need to worry about outer space. And the point I'm trying to make out is that, well, you need to worry more about outer space because that's where they're originating from and that's where they're transitioning back to when they leave. And if you can't explain where they're coming from and where they're going, it doesn't matter if you can basically state what they're doing right in front of your face, because the answer to the question is where are they coming from and where are they going. And the thing that surprises me is that even though, like, I have some specific, like the term vectating and other things like that, I find it hard to believe that you can't find anybody in the ufology community that, with the term UAP, doesn't realize that these things are not UAP once they leave the atmospheric realm. But, it gets back into the thing where people don't want to be that technical. It's so much information. There's all these opinions being thrown around, and pretty much everybody's just accepted it. Basically, it's like the thing with flying. Everything's flying, and they're comfortable with that. And the point I'm trying to make out is that the reason why nobody can resolve this phenomenon is because they're just simply taking the comfortable terminology and accepting it, and then sitting there and scratching their heads all day long instead of doing a little bit of math, for lack of a better word, and making some calculations on what technically is taking place and what words technically and accurately describe that and what words don't, and then using the words properly, and that will unlock the key to understanding what's going on. The problem is that you're running into, society thinks that people that talk about ET and UFOs are crazy. Well, if you start going into the ET and UFO community and telling them they're wrong, they'll tell you that you're crazy. So essentially what you've done is you've now gone to two levels of craziness. You have society telling you you're crazy because they don't even understand at all what you're saying. And you've got the ET and UFO people telling you you're crazy because they don't want to have to change the terminology. They're comfortable with it the way that it is, even though they can't figure out what's going on. So you have to become extremely confident in understanding what you're talking about so that you know that you're right. Because then what happens is once you know that you're right, you're willing to just sit there and take that position and hold it all day long. Whereas if you're not sure, you're on the fence. You go back and forth between, I better just use the terminology everyone else is using because they're all using it, even though it might not be right. Once you know you're right, and that's me. I've been sitting here for 35 years. I know I'm right. I waited to make sure and tested it a bunch of times. But to me, there's no point in sitting there using the term ET and UFO because it's not technically accurate.
Yeah, and that brings me to Donna's question, and she says, if you just call them, it's not really a question, it's a statement. But if you just call them UOs, then you wouldn't have a problem. Unidentified objects. They're neither flying or swimming. They're just unidentified objects.
Yeah, so that's a good point, and you could do that. So the only thing I'm doing differently is I'm basically saying, well, here's what they actually are. They're celestial TAC-1 vehicles. There's a whole nother set of terminology even beyond that I haven't even gotten into, but they're called volutes, which is like the term, like a jet. But I didn't. That's for people who spend, I have a Facebook group for people who sit here and listen to this stuff all day long, and are really into it and stuff like that. So what you're basically trying to do, you could sit there and call them extraterrestrial vehicles. So you're being a little bit more simplistic. You're still correct, but you're not being as, pinning it down as narrow and stuff like that. The point is that in society, you're dealing with a bunch of people who don't understand what's going on. And there are lots of people who know, but they're keeping their mouths shut and they're calling them UFOs and they're not pushing the answer down the road because they don't want the answer to be solved because they benefit from the differential created by exploiting the Earthlings. So the whole thing about this terminology is you have to have a terminology that's precise to the point where you can go up against the people who are running the government and the military and accurately speak at a level above their level, at an extraterrestrial level, essentially, as to what's actually going on. Otherwise, you're just going to be sitting here with them going, oh, UFO, UAP, whatever, it doesn't matter, and we'll never get anywhere. And then eventually someday they'll disclose to us what's going on and everything will change. But we're on their timeline with their agenda, with their narrative, with them running the place. And the point I'm trying to make out is if the public really wants to solve this and they really want to figure it out, the civilian public, not the government and not the military, the civilian public needs to take control of the narrative themselves. And that's going to be difficult to do because, one, the civilian public doesn't really want to do it. It's a lot of work. And two, they don't realize that the other people, aside from the government and the military, there's a lot of just people in the civilian walks of life that are these HET2 who are going to sit there and criticize everything you're doing and try and hold back because they don't want forced disclosure to take place because that throws their plan off and it makes them have to deal with more things than they want to deal with at disclosure.
So Craig is asking, how is disclosure like a civil war, and why is USA centric?
Well, so first of all, one of the points I've tried to make is that it's not USA centric; it's Earthling centric, and that's one of the mistakes that people on Earth are making is they don't realize that, and they look at everything nationally instead of planetally. In my opinion, it's ET versus EA or Earthling, but the Earthlings don't realize that they're Earthlings. They go around, they call themselves Americans and Chinese and Russian, whatever country you're from. So that's one of the things they need to change in order to figure out what's going on ahead of time. And then the other thing is the reason why I use the term civil war. It's not because I'm trying to create the visual image of a bunch of people getting slaughtered. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to describe a scenario where there is a fundamental change in the way society works. And if you go back and you look at history, the Civil War was a moment when society changed drastically because people that were slaves were freed, and the country fought. It was going to rip itself apart, and it ended up, one side won and one side lost, and the other side, the slaves became freed, and society moved forward and changed. And so, to me, what's happening is you're going to have ET and the Earthlings going through a societal shift that's going to be massive, and people need to be able to start to try to mentally imagine or envision what that might be like and what it might comprehend. It's not going to be like another day where, the Mueller report got released and, some news went on the news. It's going to be a substantial, in fact, I would even use like more than 9/11. Not that I'm trying to create the image of planes flying into buildings and destruction and stuff like that, but if you look back in your life and you think of what are huge events going on the planet, I would say that this event will be bigger than any event in the history of Earth.
Sorry, I was responding to comments and putting our number out there. And Ron is asking, and I don't know if this is a serious question, why is the Statue of Liberty a guy in drag? I don't believe that's the truth. I believe back in the day we all had kind of masculine features. I don't think it was a guy in drag, but Canadians believe something different as Americans. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I always thought it was a woman. I've never really looked at it that closely.
Yeah. Let me see what else we have going on here. So does Richard believe in Greada Treaty? And that's from Megan.
How do you spell that? I don't know that I've ever.
It's Greada Treaty.
Oh, no. So to me, I think that, like I say, the extraterrestrial architecture, they scripted Earth and all the events, people, places, locations, dates, all these things before Earth existed, and all of Earth has been them manipulating it to have their architecture that we're facilitating for them going forward. So I think that, for example, most of the founding fathers would have been humanoid extraterrestrials, and a couple would have been CEA or complicit Earthlings helping them. I think that all 45 presidents would have either been humanoid extraterrestrials or complicit Earthlings who know exactly what's going on and are taking part in this thing too. I don't think that anybody who's president of the United States doesn't know exactly what's going on long before they ever become president. So when you hear all these stories of Truman was there at Roswell and they shot down the UFO and Eisenhower met with the aliens, they signed these things. These are all just more summation where they try and put information out there to get the public to think about ET and UFOs, to discuss it, and to be more willing to listen to what's going to go on when disclosure happens, and to be more calm because they think that all these ideas of what's going on, where in reality what's going on, the Earthlings don't have the words on the planet yet to even describe to them what's actually going on. And so that's the whole point of, if you can listen to what I'm talking about, trying to do intellectual dissemination, where you're talking about HETs and CTVs and you're using the right terminology and concepts. These stories about like Eisenhower meeting extraterrestrials and signing treaties with them and all that stuff, I don't think any of that's actually true. I think Eisenhower would have either been an HET himself or a CEA complicit Earthling working with them to accomplish what they wanted long before he became president and long before he was probably even in the military. And you can use another example too. Like I say, they use clues that they leave on Earth to show us they've been here the whole time and that they're really just putting these ploys out there. If you look at Roswell and like how they say that they crashed a spacecraft and we recovered it and took it to Area 51 and we reversed engineered it and we're learning how it works and how to start building these TR-3B vehicles and stuff like that. To me, that's all just nonsense. It's just stories they're telling us. They're building these things out there. Like our planet is basically a CTV assembly line that we're working these things. And Area 51 is nothing more than an alien interstellar spacecraft base that they're telling us is a research and design center. And if you look at the word Roswell, if you say R stands for reverse engineer and OS is the last two letters of the word UFOs, and well, W comes from the word will, and ELL comes from the word cell. Roswell, an alien cell, says reversed engineered UFOs will sell, meaning this ploy that we're tricking the people into believing that we're crashing on their planet and they're just recovering the thing and reverse engineering it. The public will believe it. So you can see how they planned that before Earth ever existed, and they purposely named the city of Roswell, and they purposely had that event take place there so they could leave that hidden clue for when disclosure takes place. So once you learn how to interpret the language and you learn how to find these clues and all these other things, you can go through the history of the planet and start seeing this stuff all over the place. I mean, it's literally unbelievable.
So, Megan was speaking about the Eisenhower contract. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Well, so that's my point, is that I think that is nothing more than subliminal dissemination. They made it up. That Eisenhower would have known that extraterrestrials exist and that humanoid extraterrestrials live among us and control the government and the military long before he was even in the military. And to say that he's meeting them doesn't really matter because they're already living among us, controlling the whole planet. So it's just a story that they're putting out to try to get us to think about ETs and to think about UFOs and to think about how they're talking to the government and to think about all the possibilities of what might be going on, because it's going to prepare us to be more calm when disclosure takes place, because we've heard about ET, we've heard about UFOs, we've heard that they signed this treaty and all this other stuff, whereas to me, that's not what's actually going on. There's a whole, all 45 presidents, most of them probably would have been aliens themselves to begin with, in my opinion.
So are you saying that Roswell didn't actually happen and it's just kind of like another cover-up, or what exactly to you is Roswell?
Well, so to me, it doesn't really matter what happened there, because once again, they already exist. They're operating these vehicles in our atmosphere the whole time Earth has existed. So for 4.5 billion years, they've been transiting our airspace with these vehicles the whole time. Whether they intentionally crashed one so that they could then put this story together to try to promote the concept of, this being the introduction of extraterrestrial vehicles on our planet as sort of a little pivot point for society to always reflect back to. It doesn't really matter because they've been here the whole time. They've been doing the same things after Roswell, and they continue to do them today. They're just using it as a tool to get into the minds of the people the possibility that extraterrestrials and UFOs exist. And because we can't know for sure what happened there, everybody starts speculating all these different concepts of, oh, they shot the thing down, oh, it crashed, oh, there was two of them and they crashed, or it doesn't even really matter. The fact that we're spending our time talking about it is what they want to happen, because that's making us more aware. So we're subnating ourselves to be prepared for disclosure so that we won't panic because we'll have heard about ET and UFOs.
So what do you think about the moon as far as being like a dark star or kind of like a liftoff or whatnot for alien craft and perhaps Nazis in space or whatnot? You know, different people have different theories about the moon. What is your theory about the moon?
So I've heard a lot of those too. To me, I wouldn't be surprised if they're using the moon for certain things. I don't think the moon is like a hollow orb that they live inside and that the whole thing's just, I think it's actually a massive rock that functions to help ebb the tides and other things to do with the way the planet works and stuff like that. I wouldn't be surprised if they go and operate off and do other things with it. But to me, it's also basically it's like a distraction. It's basically saying, it's kind of like how they say they have bases in Antarctica and they've got these bases underneath the ground and all these other things. They probably do, but the point I'm trying to make is that it doesn't matter. Even if you have aliens on the moon and you have aliens in Antarctica and you have aliens inside the Earth and you have aliens all over these different places, the point I'm trying to make to you is that if you just turn on your television set and you start watching the famous people who appear every day and every night when you're watching all the shows that you watch, some of those people are not from Earth. And if the public would wake up and start questioning that and talking about it, we could force disclosure and we could have an actual human being who looks like us but's from another planet start explaining to us what's going on, and we could resolve this whole thing. If we have to try and go to the moon or out to Antarctica or dig down into the middle of the Earth and pull something out that doesn't even look like a human, one, we're never going to get everybody together to want to do that. And two, it's going to freak the people out a lot more on the planet if the thing doesn't look like a human and it's telling us what's going on. So I think that the highest probability of getting to disclosure faster and of getting a disclosure where the planet can remain in a calm, somewhat organized fashion for something that's going to be very chaotic and very disorganized and overloading us with information, the fastest way that we can get there is by addressing the possibility that humanoid extraterrestrials live among us and they're prominent in all the normal walks of life, the government, the military, Hollywood, the technology industry, Silicon Valley, businesses, travel around the world, just anywhere that you think that people are functioning, and especially famous people because they have the advanced knowledge of how the earth works and where the future's going and all this other stuff, so they would be prominent people that you would be seeing every day. We have a better chance of solving this thing by focusing on that. And what they're doing is they're saying, hey, focus on the moon. You guys, Nazis went to the moon with UFOs, and focus out in Antarctica and look at the pyramids underneath the ocean. And we got some radio signals from some star system 30 billion light years away. And, we got this, we got all these other things that we can't do anything with. And they've got the public, focusing on all those other things. What I'm trying to say is let's focus on the one thing that's sitting right in front of us that nobody's talking about, because that would be the best chance of getting this resolved and to get it resolved quickly and calmly.
So why do you think that there are humanoid ETs among us? Like, what is the purpose of that? Are they kind of like spies among us, or what exactly is happening with that scenario?
It's like their secret weapon, in the sense that of all the, so back to the analogy of, if you look at the ocean, there's an infinite number of life forms in the ocean. When you look out into outer space, what we're going to realize is there's an infinite number of life forms in outer space in terms of the body types that, like the bar scene in Star Wars, just more than you can even imagine. But by putting the humanoid extraterrestrials down here on Earth, they can walk among us, and we think that they're Earthlings, so that gives them an advantage over us in the sense that they can become our leaders in the government and the military. They can become famous people and movie stars and the smartest technologically engineered people in terms of designing things on the planet, and the smartest math guys and all such stuff. And we just think that they're Earthlings, so we'll allow them to direct the way society works, because we'll see them as people in positions of authority, and we won't question who they are. So it gives them an enormous, and to use an analogy, it's like going into the military, and when you want to defeat another side, if you could get one of your military guys to go in there and put on their uniform and speak their language and convince them he's one of them, it's going to now give you an advantage over them, because they don't realize that one of their own is not one of their own. And so that's the point I'm trying to make, is that Earthlings don't realize that not all the people on Earth are from Earth, and that's their secret to controlling Earth.
So Fab is asking, what is your viewpoint on Mel's Hole?
Hold on 1 second. Is that like MELS?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've never even heard of that before. Again, it's a hole that they say it's bottomless. I mean, that gets into a more evolved question of how can you have something that goes all the way through Earth without the core of the Earth is supposed to be, a liquid thing that's super hot. How this thing would go through that and out through the other side, I don't know that it does that. But to me, what I do is I don't focus on things like that, because to me, they're not going to help me get disclosure. It's just I'm curious now that I've seen it. I wonder what it is, but I'm not going to spend any time on it, because it's not going to, it's sort of like, what's that thing in England, the Stonehenge? I'm interested in what Stonehenge is. There's a lot of, things on the planet. I don't know what they are, and I'm curious what the reason is for them. But at the same time, what I've done is I've narrowed my focus down to two things: the humanoid extraterrestrials living among us, and what I'm calling CTVs, celestial TAC 1 vehicles, that there's actually terminology that describes their extraterrestrial spacecraft. And by focusing on those two, I'm hoping to force disclosure, and rather than spending time on all the other possible things that are out there, it's, I'm just trying to keep the narrow focus on things that I think will bring about disclosure quicker, not just answering questions of things I find interesting.
And when I was reading about Mel's Hole, like, certain people were throwing dead things into it, and it kind of reminded me of Pet Sematary. When they come out, they weren't quite right. They were the same entity as far as dog, cat, whatever, but they weren't the same spiritually. They were a bit darker.
I mean, it certainly wouldn't surprise me. I mean, like I said earlier, I wouldn't. I mean, nothing. When people tell me things now, almost nothing, I won't even let it surprise me, even if it starts to surprise me. Whereas when I was younger, I would be like, oh, that's crazy. There's no way that could be. I'm convinced now that if ET wants to put a hole in the ground and you could put something in it and it will go through a state change into a different type of being, I wouldn't. It's like, have you heard of Skinwalker Ranch? There's all these different things going on out there, and to me, I would believe it's possible. I'm certainly not going to say it's not possible. I just don't put my focus on it, because I want to get disclosure so that I can actually get the people who are knowing what's going on to explain to us what all this stuff is, versus us just sitting here and contemplating everything.
So Sharon is asking, what does Richard think that will provide disclosure, government or a investigative journalist, etc.? And who would provide a protocol for disclosure?
Well, so that gets back to me. There's two possible things are going to happen. One, CTAD, which is Scheduled Extraterrestrial Architecture Disclosure, meaning they planned before Earth existed. They put in play a plan that has an actual time frame in which they plan on telling the Earthlings what's going on, which would be disclosure. How they're going to provide that in terms of, will a journalist do a news break on a UFO sighting that then cascades into the whole place just finding out what's going on, or is Donald Trump going to stand up, like you said, on a Wednesday because it's hump day and go, well, guess what, everybody, today's the day. I mean, I don't know how that's going to happen. I know somehow they're going to have to disclose it, because you can just see that in order for them to get to the next step of the process, they have to explain to us to some degree what's going on to elevate us to be able to deal with being beings that can transit star systems and go back and forth from Earth. The only other thing that I'm saying, and the whole reason why I'm on this show with Tessa right now, is that I'm trying to sort of do a grassroots approach, even though I think that you need to get the people who are in the positions of power, because they're ignoring it. Back to your example, Tessa, of going after the guys who are the more like the infantry guys, who are the not the officers but the enlisted guys, and just trying to get the basic general people in society, just the general public, to listen. If they were aware that there's certain terminology that actually explains what's going on, and they may not like it because it's not the story they want to hear, but if they really want to know what's happening, you can see for yourself. You don't need me to stand there and be your tour guide. You can teach yourself what's taking place on the Earth and see it with your own eyes and comprehend it with your own mind. And so that's why I'm basically explaining this thing, asking people to read the petition and sign it, because it will enable society to take back control of the narrative and force disclosure sooner and bring this ET UFO phenomenon to an end.
So I'm wondering if you can fill our listeners in on your signature tally. Like, where can they find this? Where can they sign off to gain disclosure for humanoid aliens basically living among us? Where do they go to find this to sign off on?
So the petition is at extraterrestrialdisclosurepetition.com. So obviously all that's one statement. There's no spaces when you go to a domain name, but if you just go to Google and you type in extraterrestrialdisclosurepetition.com, it'll bring you to a site on change.org where it'll give a more in-depth description of the HET living among us and the CTVs, and ask you for your signature to the petition. And then if you're interested in, so that's the number one thing. If you go to that and tell people about it, just to try to promote the petition and get people to sign and get it more, get the word out about it. And then if you want to learn more about this and talk about it on a daily basis, you can get me on Twitter. My handle's at ET UFO Disclosure. You can ask me questions. I can give you a link to my Facebook page where you can read. Basically, I post each day. I try and take events that are going on in the world in real time on a daily basis and show how the HET are, involved in the events each day, so that you can see the stuff in real time. And I use all the terminology and the concepts, and I explain the strategies and the tactics that they're employing, so you don't have to sit here and keep listening about Roswell every day and just going through the archive of UFO stories that everyone else has already heard. I try and explain the present day reality of what's taking place and give my opinion each day based on my 35 years of knowledge of having been aware of this for all this time as to what I think is actually happening.
So how many signatures do you have so far? How many short are you? How many more do you need?
Well, I think there's like 4,000 and something right now. What it really comes down to is when I talk to people who work for larger for example, with 4,000 signatures, people on like these paranormal radio shows, they find it pretty interesting. People approach me on my Twitter site and want to talk to me about it and stuff like that. But when I want to then get larger audiences, like you might find on mainstream media news outlets, or people who are, like I had a guy from the Huffington Post, I think it was, who writes on this type topic and stuff like that. And he's like, get back to me when you get, maybe 20,000 or something. So the signatures basically is telling them that how many people in society are interested in this topic and willing to, listen to it, talk about it, and interested. So if they're going to write an article on a subject about something that people aren't familiar with, because even though it's not really ET and UFOs, my thing is that it's even beyond that. It's HET and CTVs. For a person from another larger organization to want to write an article, they need to see that a lot of people are interested in this from the grassroots efforts that I've been trying to collect people, because that gives them some indication that, hey, it's worth putting a story together on what this guy is saying. And as this thing gets more and more people, more and more signatures, it enables me to put it in front of larger mediums to get the word out there, which then it's like a snowballing effect going down the hill, get more signatures. And as it gets more and more signatures, at some point you can then, one, it will pick up global steam, which is what I really wanted to do more than anything. But then you can start putting it in front of the people in the government, the United Nations, wherever you think that it's. I've got some opinions of where it would be best directed. But, that's still a long ways away. You can just count how many signatures it has to determine how much progress it's making. And the hardest part right now is, one, just getting the word out there, and then two, because it's more extreme, it's not just basic ET UFO, people have a hard time coming to grips with it.
So what exactly brought you to the realization, and we're exactly 2 minutes into the end of our time, what brought you to the realization that this is actually happening?
Well, so it's back to me in the 80s when I got out of college, and I lived across the street from Miramar, where Top Gun was, and I would talk to all the fighter weapons instructor pilots, and they wouldn't discuss how they would deal with UFOs. And I found that to be not normal, because they would discuss how our enemies operate. And so it made me, have a high level understanding of aviation. So I started researching, what is the possibility that HET could be down here on Earth? If they were, where would they go and what would they do? And I was convinced the first place they'd go would be to the fighter weapons schools, because they'd be the best pilots. And I started studying that, flying is not possible in outer space. So the terminology is not being used correctly. So basically that's where I found my branch into this phenomenon. It wasn't something I was interested in or intended. It just kind of happened by, if our lives are scripted or planned, that was where it took me. No, I mean, just, if you can sign that petition, I'd really appreciate it. And if you're more interested in the subject matter, send me a thing on Twitter, and I'll answer some questions for you, or give you my Facebook page, and you can I'll read my post there if you want to find out more about it.
Thank you again for being my guest tonight. It was so wonderful having you on the show this evening. Can you give us your links again as far as how to sign your petition and how to find you?
So the petition is at extraterrestrialdisclosurepetition.com, and my Twitter handle is at ET UFO disclosure.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on the show tonight. It was so wonderful having you.
Thanks, Tessa. I really enjoyed having the conversation with you as well.
And thank you to everyone in Spaced Out Radio, Facebook, Spreaker, Twitter, Paranormal Radio, TalkStream Live, Deep Talk Radio, and wherever else in the universe you're listening tonight. I had a wonderful time this evening, and it was my pleasure, literally and figuratively, and I can't wait to do it again tomorrow night when we have Megan on, and we're going to be talking about the paranormal, astral travel, all kinds of epic things on spacedoutradio.com. Until next time, nighty night, love and light to all my space cases out there. You guys have a wonderful Sunday. I'll see you all back here tomorrow night. And don't forget, we are all in this together. Together, we can make the world a little better. And together, my friends, we own the night.
Dressed as emperors, offering you 7 wonders, promising the deepest thunder. We'll tell you you're the perfect girl. We'll crawl for miles through the sand to win your hand and be your man. I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. For you. I will start till I reach the top just to be there with you.
So if you guys would like to come into the after party with us at the SOR Asylum, please call in at 970-335-9596. That's 970-335-9596. I hope to see you guys there. If not, I'll see you guys tomorrow night. Take care of my yous, take it easy, and enjoy your Sunday.